Morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to UIC's virtual 2020 campus-wide new teaching assistant orientation. To start off with, on behalf of UIC and the Graduate College, I would like to congratulate you on your appointments as teaching assistants. And for those of you who are newly admitted graduate students, welcome to UIC. We are so pleased to have you here. My name is Vandana Label, and I am the director of the new International Teaching Assistant Program, also known as ITAP, housed in the Graduate College. Along with the ITAP staff and the Graduate College, we have organized today's first ever virtual new teaching assistant orientation. Our co-hosts for today's program are Megan Geyer, Renee Brown, Morella Silva, Elena Borzhenkova, and last but not least, Shannon Reedon, IT manager at the Graduate College. Since this is our first virtual orientation, there may be some hiccups. So in advance of today's events, thank you for your patience and participation. Before we look at the agenda, let's briefly discuss the goals of today's orientation. This orientation is aimed at giving you general information that will help you with your roles and responsibilities as teaching assistants at UIC. Since many of you are coming from various disciplines across campus, our goal is to acquaint you with the various campus offices and programs that can provide support and resources to you as a new TA. Your departments can provide more specific information about your individual appointments and your roles and your specific responsibilities during their departmental orientations. Today's program includes 4 panels led by members of UIC staff, faculty, and experienced teaching assistants. We will be recording the entire webinar, and we will make the recording available for online viewing after the event. We will also share short videos from several campus offices and programs that give more information about the resources available. Now, let's take a closer look at today's agenda. First up, there is a welcome address by the Dean of the Graduate College, Dr. Karen Polly. The first panel begins at 2 p.m. and will provide an introduction to teaching at UIC and creating an interactive classroom. You will also learn about UIC's certificate program for college teaching. Then there will be a 10-minute break. This will give you time to stretch. At 2:40, the next panel will begin, and this panel addresses preparing to teach online and inclusive teaching. It also includes resources for online teaching, tips and strategies to create an inclusive teaching classroom, as well as on-the-ground experiences from 2 very experienced TAs in the TA and chemistry departments. At 3:20, a panel of speakers from the Centers for Cultural and Social Change at UIC will present about the amazing diversity at UIC and provide advice on how to create an accessible classroom and use principles of universal design. Then at 4:10, there will be another 10-minute break. Our last panel begins at 4:20. These panelists will provide strategies on identifying distressed students and providing support and resources to these students. And at 4:50, the co-presidents of the Graduate Employee Organization have prepared a short presentation, after which the orientation concludes. Now, during each panel, you may type questions in the chat box. See the bottom of your screen. With time permitting, the panelists will try to answer your questions. After the orientation, we will be sending you a link to the recording and the answers to your questions, as well as we will be posting them on the Graduate College website. We have just sent you a PDF of today's orientation agenda. in the chat box. Please download it so that you can refer to the agenda throughout the day. If you are an international teaching assistant or a non-native English speaker that needs to complete the language assessment, please visit the ITAP website. It's listed on your agenda and you can schedule an appointment. You can also email us at itap@uic.edu. Thank you for attending today's orientation, and we sincerely hope that it helps you feel prepared for teaching at UIC and gives you the resources you need to successfully carry out your instructional responsibilities. Now I'm very pleased to introduce you to the Dean of the Graduate College, Professor Karen Colley. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today and a pleasure to welcome you again to our new TA orientation for 2020, our very first virtual orientation of any kind, in fact. So as I hope you already appreciate, your job as teaching assistants is critical for the teaching and learning mission of UIC and our continued commitment to student success. I think it's always important for you to keep in mind that you, and not the professor, may be the student's major contact and mentor. And I cannot emphasize enough to you what a key role you play in the lives of the students you teach and how important you are for their success. Teaching is both gratifying and challenging, and this year is unlike any other before. And some of you will be TAing virtually, while others may be actually in person assisting in lab courses. No matter what, both situations are going to present unique challenges for your ability to get to know the students you are working with. In addition, as I'm sure you're aware, UIC students are very diverse. You'll be interacting with students with very different experiences and preparation levels. And I ask that you pay attention to these differences and try your hardest to help each and every student achieve their maximum potential. I know that all of you are up to this task, and I know that all of you will grow with this experience. So while you are serving our undergraduates as TAs, I want you to remember that you are also engaging in some serious professional development that you can extend even further by seeking out other training experience to build your teaching skills. And you're going to be hearing about some courses you can take at UIC, but I want to bring to your attention something else. An exciting new affiliation for UIC that can help you become a better teacher. And I'm going to share a slide right now. And I hope you all can see this. Everyone good? Okay. So UIC has been accepted as a member of the national organization CERTL, the Center for the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning. Over the next year, my colleague Erin O'Leary, our new executive director of the Center for Teaching Excellence, and I, along with a number of faculty, staff, and students, some of them who are going to talk to you today, including Bailey Stusak, Michelle Parker-Katz, Tanya Pruitt-White, and others, will be working to create programming for UIC graduate students and postdocs in all disciplines that follows the CERTL core ideas: learning through diversity, learning communities, and teaching as research. But what I want to emphasize to you is you can do something right now and sign up on the CERTL website at certl.net and get access to a wide array of online workshops and courses that will help you with your teaching. While CERTL was initially set up for STEM graduate students and postdocs, at UIC, as at many universities around the country, we will be extending our programming to trainees in all disciplines. So there's no reason you shouldn't go and sign up and get access to all this great stuff right now. So finally, I wish you the best of luck this semester, not only with your TA assignments, but also with your own coursework, research, and scholarship. Good luck and have fun.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Kali. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the panelists for our first panel today. The name of the panel is Teaching at UIC, so it's a pretty fundamental place to start. So joining us today, we have Dr. Michelle Parker-Katz, who has been at UIC for over 20 years in the College of Education. She also does clinical work at Chicago Public Schools. Also, Dr. Tanya Pruitt-White, who's a clinical assistant professor in kinesiology and nutrition. Dr. Arjun Mitra, who is an assistant professor at California State, Los Angeles, and also a UIC alumni, who recently finished his PhD in managerial studies in 2020. And Dr. Marco Bocchese, who is a visiting assistant professor of political science. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor over to our panelists.
I'll start. I'm Michelle Parker-Katz, and I'm in the College of Education, and I've been here a long time. So I want to start by welcoming all of you. I want to piggyback on what Karen Cooley said about the importance of you being here. You know, a main thing that a university does is to educate and to encourage and excite and support the learning of our undergraduate students. That is a huge mission here at UIC. Do you know that UIC is a land-grant university? So way back when land in Illinois was granted to universities, the idea was that universities would educate the people of the state. And not only that, UIC is also a top Research One institution, and we are an urban institution. So we have such a unique mission as an urban Research One land-grant institution, and you all are a huge part of that as teachers. So I welcome you to teaching. It is so exciting, and I hope that you'll see that in this panel and also in the panels to come this afternoon. What I want to start with is you thinking about a teacher who you had. You know, just take a couple seconds now and think about a teacher you had who you really liked. So that teacher could have been in your young years in grade school or elementary. It could have been a teacher in secondary school and high school. Maybe it was a teacher in your undergraduate years. Maybe it's a teacher in your graduate years. Maybe, I sure do hope so, there are a few of those teachers. And what I'd like you to do now is to jot down a few key words that come to mind when you think about that teacher or those few teachers who you've really enjoyed. Take a couple seconds and just jot down a couple key words that come to mind. I'll give you a few seconds. I'll give you a few more seconds and then we'll come back. Okay, you have those words? Now, let me put my teacher hat on here. This is not a teaching session, but if you were in the courses that Dr. White, Tanya White, and I teach, we would talk about this. And we would talk about how this is a strategy for engaging students. And Dr. Mitra Arjun is going to talk to you more about that a little bit later. But we could have done a lot of things with what you just did, right? We could gather them into a word noodle, right? A word cloud, and allow students to see, right, all the ideas in the class. We could have done a poll of various different kinds, right? You know that there are numerous kinds of polling software, and there are wonderful polling software that are part of the tools that we have on our wonderful Blackboard system, our learning management system. Think about a few different things that we could have done to do what? To show how each individual has ideas, and that we can collect those ideas, and that all of us as individuals can learn from those ideas. All right, I'm going to give you another task. Now I want you to think about, again, that good teacher, or the couple teachers, or the few teachers. And I want you to think about what might have enabled those teachers to do what they did. That is, what are the things that they did? Maybe that you saw and maybe that you didn't see, that enabled you to have that good experience and to write down those key words about them in the teacher role. Make sense? I'll say it one more time. Think about this question. What enabled those good teachers to do what they did? Think about what you saw and think about what you might not have seen. Jot that down. I'll give you a few seconds. All right, take a few more seconds to think that through, and then we'll come back together. Okay, let me put a little teaching hat on. I know it's not a teaching session, but a little teaching hat again. What are we doing here? Well, first, we're giving you time to think on your own, right? And we're also helping you think hard about your own experiences as a learner, because learning and teaching are intricately connected. They're very, very reciprocal. Something else that is much more particular and specific is, and this is a thing that I have, I see it when I'm in classrooms, and I think about it a lot in my own practice, and that is that often we ask a question and we call on somebody right away, right? Have you had that experience as a learner? That you're in the middle of thinking of the question and all of a sudden the teacher calls on Arjun, or Keel calls on Shannon, or calls on Michelle, or calls on Renee, and you're still thinking about the idea. So I like to ask a question like I just did and give people time to think, and then I like to say, okay, take a few more seconds and then let's come back together. So it's about really providing time for people to think. Well, if we were thinking together, then we might have come up with a few of these ideas. Take a look at that slide. Maybe those are some of the things you thought about. Maybe as you're looking at these ideas, you're thinking about some more things that come to mind. Maybe you're thinking, oh yeah, I see what you mean there, Michelle, when you wrote disciplinary content I'm teaching, but I would have worded it this way. Or maybe you're thinking, I'm not sure what you mean by disciplinary content. Or, what do I think the content of my teaching is going to be? Or maybe you're thinking, well, I don't set the content because I'm a TA and somebody else is going to set the content and I have to do what that someone else is telling me. But these are all the kinds of questions that we as teachers, no matter where we're teaching, have to consider. Yes? Does that make sense? Right? Because we're all teaching. We're all developing connections between teaching and learning. And we're all developing relationships. And when you think about that, a Venn diagram comes to mind. So in one circle, you can think about who are your students and what strengths do they bring? What interests, what preferences do they bring? What wonderful, rich background experiences do they bring? What perhaps challenges do they bring that you can help them to ease away or to manage? A challenge might not ever go away, but we manage those challenges. Well, what we're doing is we're working with our students and we're working with the content that you are teaching. So it's the academic or disciplinary content, or what we often call the subject matter that you're teaching. And we also are paying attention to what we call social emotional learning. And yet another set of acronyms, right? SEL, we call that. When we put those ideas together in the key intersection, we believe is effective teaching. And effective teaching that is linked with students learning, and it's linked with learning of not only facts, but it's linked with learning that is higher order. So it's linked with learning in which we're analyzing ideas and in which we're assessing them and we're creating new ideas. And certainly the little bubbles around there, certainly we can see that there are multiple dynamics that touch upon this Venn diagram, right? That influence it. Certainly one right now is the national reckoning in the United States about race and racism and anti-Blackness. Certainly it is the health crisis, and certainly it is the economic crisis. But there are other influences as well. What we want you to know on this panel is that teaching is something to study and to wonder about. It is a major intellectual act. It is a major moral act. It is a major political act. And by politics, I mean it is an act of power. Because as teachers, we have power. And so how do we think about how we share that? How do we think about our roles as teachers and our work? And when we think about that, we want to help you to think along with us about this idea that we teach students content. We don't teach content. We teach our students the content. So if you want to learn more about teaching, we want to encourage you to do what Dr. Cooley mentioned, and that is sign up for CERTL. I somehow can't find my CERTL slide, which I had too, but please sign up. We're so excited about that new resource here. So sign up, it's for free, and there are so many resources. And I know that Bailey is going to talk more with you about that. And we encourage you to learn more about the Foundations of College Instruction program. This is a UIC certificate program, and you can take 3 courses and learn more about and study more about teaching. And the 3 courses are listed on this slide. And I just want to say very quickly, the 2 courses that I've taught, 592 is a course that we changed this summer, and it's a course very much about teaching as inquiry. 594 is a course that I teach in the spring every year. And that is a course in which you study a lot about effective teaching strategies and practices, and you explore that in your own teaching. Now, if you want to take this course and you are not teaching during that semester, please don't let that be a stop, because we can work that out and figure out alternatives to that. And I do want to say 592 is offered typically in the fall. This year we offered it in the summer as well, and 594 in the spring. And I want to stop because you've been hearing me chatter on, and I want to share with our other panelists. And I'll stop by saying thank you. And I'll also stop by saying welcome. You are such a key part of UIC, and I'm so glad that you're part of our teaching world here at UIC. Thank you. I'll put myself on mute and.
Okay, everyone. Can everyone see my screen? Can I thumbs up? Okay, awesome. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Dr. Parker Katz. I'm Tanya Pruitt-White. I have been teaching Foundations of College Teaching since the fall of 2016, and the course is evolving. I'm imagining that many of you, like me, are entering your graduate work, and you might feel overwhelmed by the experience of being a teaching assistant. And I want you to know that I understand. I did not have any formal training in teaching, probably unlike Dr. Parker Katz. But I can remember being a TA and thinking that if I just read more, if I knew more material, if I knew all the facts, that I might be a better teacher. And over time, I began to learn that that wasn't at all the case, that I had to think about how do I create an environment where every student feels heard, seen, welcomed, embraced. How do I enter the space in my identities? What are my unconscious biases? Started recognizing that this was incredibly important. And when I received my first full-time teaching position, I remember thinking this: I'm only teaching 4 courses. And they were Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And I literally felt, oh, I'll have so much time. I was not well prepared for what it meant to teach in college. And so one of the things that I'm very excited and passionate about teaching 593 is to create a foundation for future college educators in learning what it means to enter a space as an instructor, the planning that it requires, and how do we continually evolve as individuals, people, as well as instructors. So I've had a lot of different experiences that are very non-traditional, and I've recognized I'm trained in sport and exercise psychology, and I have taught exercise physiology, which is like at the molecular level, what's happening in the body when we exercise. I was very ill prepared. Biomechanics, the physics of how our bodies move. But I learned that if I could learn more about how to teach and how to create a space and guide learners, that I didn't have to always be, I had to know the content, but I could not possibly be an expert. So on my own accord, I began seeking out teaching workshops. I joined college educator book clubs where we read about best teaching practices. We read Fink, all of these pedagogists within college education. And I started to learn on my own. So you might be saying, okay, I get it. Enough about Dr. Tanya Pruitt-White. So why 593? Why might you want to consider taking a course like the Foundations of College Teaching? Well, we know that, like myself, many students, postdocs, as well as professors have very little formal training or experiences on how to teach. We become experts in our fields, whether that be anthropology, business, kinesiology, and we know our field and the material within our field. But when we go out to maybe become a TA or become a postdoc or a professor, that we then start thinking about how am I going to deliver this information? And so that might be a reason why 593 might be of consideration for you. So in the course, it's offered every fall, spring, and summer. These are some of the things that we do in the course. We think about what is our own teaching philosophy, what are our values, what do we want students to leave knowing, feeling, how will we assess students, how do we want our classroom to engage, look, feel. We also think about our own course syllabi for an ideal course we want to teach in the future. And rather than just doing what other faculty have always done and modeling a previous syllabi, we create our own intentionally. We also develop lesson plans where we think about how we're going to maybe put students in groups. How much time will we spend on Zoom for breakouts, for small group discussions? And as well as how will we assess students? How will we create blueprints for exams? Things that I, 10, 15 years ago, had no idea about. We also create a 5-week teaching progression where you think about how you're going to scaffold week 1 to week 2, 3, and 4 so that you can meet the targets and the learning outcomes that you have for your course. You can see there's a lot of other things that we cover in the course. I want to say in this time that we're living in, things being on Zoom, we also talk about the realities of higher education, what it's going to feel and be like to potentially teach fully online asynchronous courses. How do we create community? How do we make sure that we are intentional on how we are inclusive for all of our learners and classes? So we try to engage in how are we going to better evolve with the changing times in education today. So you might be thinking, okay, what are some of the next steps? I would encourage you to ask previous graduate students, maybe in your college, who have taken 593 as well as completed the college certificate, to give it a shot. Enroll in 593 and see how you might learn from other people. I think one of the most enriching parts of all of our college teaching certificate courses is the fact that an anthropologist can learn from a biomedical engineer, and a scientist in biology can learn from an English professor. And I find that it's very enriching because we talk about our commonalities in different fields as well as our differences in how we approach teaching. So I wanted to keep it brief, but if you have any questions about 593 or college teaching generally, certainly you can reach out to Dr. Parker Katz, but I wanted to also provide you with my email information. So feel free to email me. There's still room within the course, and I wish you all the very best of luck as you start on this very important journey, and you're an incredible resource for students as well as faculty and the college. So thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Mitra.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you, Michelle, as well. It's really a pleasure to be back here and conduct this workshop for all of you. And I would just mention that I actually took GC 593 3 years back, and I really benefited a lot from it. And some of the tricks and techniques which I learned from the course, I used it when I started teaching. And especially 2 things which I learned very well was how to create a syllabus from scratch, and as well as create a teaching statement. So both of this have been very handy, especially the teaching statement was very handy when I went to the job market last year, because every school, whichever you apply to, they'll ask for a teaching statement. And if you have already prepared one in advance, you just can go back and draw that and share it with the schools without having to prepare it from scratch. So what I would like to share today is my experiences as an instructor at UIC. Now I'm starting a new position from tomorrow, but I still miss UIC a lot, and I would like to share my experiences while I was teaching there at UIC. So I was privileged enough to teach for 9 semesters at UIC and 4 different courses. And as part of these courses, I did teach traditional classroom courses, remote synchronous courses, as well as an asynchronous course, Zoom course as well in summer. And so I have different experiences while teaching all these courses. So would just like to give you some idea about what things which work for me and which I really learned in the process of teaching. especially the first day of class, since you all are new teaching assistants and you will be starting teaching from scratch, or you'll be working as teaching assistants in labs perhaps. So the first day of class is very, very essential. Now in this situation where everything is remote, it becomes, the pressure increases or intensifies much more. So there are a couple of things which I generally kept in mind and which I advise others to keep in mind as well. Especially for the first class, expectations are higher from the instructor or for the teaching assistant. So always arrive before time, especially in case of you're doing synchronous Zoom sessions. Do log in much before in advance because you might not be sure of any technical glitches which might happen. So you need to be very careful about that. Then you need to start the class and lab on time and end it on time. This is very important because it sets up expectations. So if you are particular about timing, students will also be very particular about timing. And if you have a long period, like a long class session, I would advise to create have a break in between, but do stick to the same duration and the same timing. So for example, I was teaching a summer course last year, and the course was scheduled from 10:30 to 1. So I always used to give a break at noon for 10 minutes, and I was very consistent about it. So the students knew that, okay, they have 10 minutes and they'll come back within 12:10. So that's very crucial that you stick to that timing. Introduce yourself in the first day. Definitely talk about your research. Talk about why are you passionate about research or why are you passionate about teaching. Try to build a connection, interpersonal connection with the students. That really helps set up the tone for the course. And do describe the syllabus in detail, especially because students tend to overlook or ignore the syllabus. So go through each and every point and set expectations in the beginning, whether it is about submissions or late assignments or missing class or missing an exam, whatever it is. Do remember names. Now it might be difficult or challenging if you're a part of a class which is huge, say 100 students, but I would still advise you to remember the names because it really helped me a lot, because it helps connect with the students in like on a one-to-one level. Now in Blackboard, there is an option where you can actually go to the course tools, and there's this class photo rooster where you can find out who are registered for your course. You can get to see their pictures, and you can also get to see their names. Now that really helped me a lot in the past because I could really identify with the names, with the faces in the classroom. So with the help of this photo rooster, and knowing their names really helps a lot because you can directly ask them any question or ask them to participate in the classroom. And UIC is very famous, and something which I really like about it is the extent of diversity which we have in classrooms. Especially there are students from different countries, different ethnicities, different racial backgrounds. So that makes the class very diverse, and that's why each and every student is distinct and needs to be treated distinctly. So it's very essential to treat them as a separate individual and build a one-to-one connection with them. Encourage each one to participate. Students might be very hesitant or they may be shy or introvert, but still I would suggest like create a safe space for them so that they feel very free to take part in discussions or ask questions. And at the same time, try to address them by their names because it gives them sort of a unique sense of identity if you call them by their names. Be friendly, but not over friendly, because power distance is a tricky dynamics. I guess some of your international students as well, and it varies a lot from country to country. So in a country like the United States, there is low power distance. So one needs to be very careful that you are there as an instructor, as a mentor who is there to help, but not as somebody who's like a very nice buddy to the students. Group assignments, these are something which are very challenging, especially if you're in a class where you need to have team assignments or group assignments. Students students tend to do a lot of social loafing, especially in group projects. So what happens is that like one or two students do the entire work and other students do nothing. And this is something which I've faced a lot in all the courses which I've taught. And oftentimes students come complaining to me in which they say that the other students are not working. And so I always tend to make them meet me as a group rather than individually so that I can hear to each of them as a group. And rather than acting as telling them what to do, I just act as a coach and make them realize what are the tensions between them and how they can resolve it. So it's basically you figure it out yourself. I'll just help you. I'm not there to like handhold you and take you through the entire team project or the group project process. But it's very essential. It can become challenging if students end up social loafing in a group. Office hours, I know it's difficult in case of remote teaching to have office hours, but still, like I was teaching an asynchronous course in summer. And what I did was that every Thursday, I used to keep like 1 hour office hour through a Zoom session where students used to come in and ask questions. And I think that's pretty flexible because students can reach out to you in advance if they have a question, and then you can directly address them at that Zoom office hour. So I would definitely advise you to keep office hours, even if it's remote teaching, and do it perhaps through Zoom, because that really works best for everyone. The last thing which I just want to give some suggestions is grading. Now, grading can become very stressful and as well as challenging if you keep it till the end. And so whenever you conduct an exam or whenever there's an assignment, try to grade it as quickly as possible, because students tend to get very impatient if they don't see the grades quickly. And it also, they start questioning your legitimacy as well. So don't keep it till the end, because it also like makes things easier for you when you do the grading on time. So these are some of the tricks and tips which worked for me as an instructor at UIC, and I hope it works for you as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at my UIC email address, and I'll be happy to answer it. And also any kind of questions regarding the GC courses, feel free to drop me a mail as well. So I'll stop here and pass it on to Marco, who will carry on.
Well, good evening to you all. Hopefully you're able to hear me well. So I just wanted to share with you a few aspects of my experience, first as a TA while I was pursuing my own PhD, and then as a teacher. I've been teaching at UIC since the fall of 2018, so I am entering my third year. We are all facing new challenges. This will be the first semester that I, as well as most of you, will be teaching or assisting instructors on a full online mode. So I don't really know what is awaiting us in the fall. I have some expectations. I want just to highlight two key aspects, relational aspects of your role as a TA, something that I learned on my own skin. I had no formal training in teaching before I started serving as a TA in 2013 at Northwestern. And I had to learn from myself, and now I can tell you what I would have loved to have, and perhaps I had only to a certain extent. You are part of a team. You need to understand very quick what is your part within this team. You are an asset to the students and the professor as well. As you know way too well, teaching responsibilities are not evenly allocated, and the instructor must be and is the ultimate responsible for the course content. But I strongly encourage you to reach out, to use this possibility, this opportunity, to talk with the instructor, to engage the instructor, to bring to his or her attention something that you might find inappropriate, untimely, something that the instructor may not see, because perhaps this is something that happens during your TA sessions. So it's led by you, not by the professor. And so be in constant touch with the professor. We are a team, we're in this together. I know this sentence has been kind of abused as of late, but this is really the case. And we want to work together towards achieving the course objectives. It's important that you consult with your instructor, as well as the instructor reaches out to you, and you keep working together. Be professional. Now, it's expected for me to say so, and I was told so back in the days, but this is not less true than that. Make yourself available. If the instructor tries to schedule appointments with you, Zoom sessions, this is a challenging time, so perhaps even being a bit more flexible than during normal times, that is highly appreciated on both hands. You expecting the instructor to be flexible, and the other way around. Again, this is the first relational issue or dimension, apologies, the way you behave as a part of a team led by the professor, but still a team in which you play a key part, a unique part, and a part that cannot be done by the professor himself or herself. And the second is the relationship with your students. Back in the days, I cannot hide the fact, I cannot neglect the fact that as somebody who did not have any formal training in pedagogy or teaching, I had become a bit too close to me. Like I was always the advocate of students. I was leaning a bit too much towards the students, like playing the devil's advocate for them, which is good. You should care. You should learn their name if you can do so. That is something I try to do myself. And I second that is an excellent recommendation for you to at the very least try to have an in-person knowledge of the students so as to engage him or her even more so. But at the same time, remember which are the boundaries. There are some boundaries that are very rigid, some others that instead will allow you to basically do a bit more and try to do more. So I was already told that I am running late, so my apologies. If you want to reach out to me for, I don't know, a one-on-one conversation, if I can help you with anything, please do feel free to reach out to my UIC institutional email address. And I'll leave it there, and please feel free to reach out.
Okay, perfect timing, panel. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us for the first panel. That concludes this portion of the webinar. Do stick around. We are going to have a 15-minute break. I'm sorry, a 10-minute break. And then we'll start the next panel. So sit tight, stretch, grab a coffee, and we'll see you in just a few minutes. Thank you again to all of our panelists.
Hi, everyone. It is 2:39 for us, so we have another minute to go. We're going to be starting soon, so I just wanted to let you know that that's why we were silent for a while. We had a 10-minute break. We are back on track right now. So I am Morella Silva, and I'm going to be introducing the panelists for this second part today that we are going to be talking about. So we have the topic for the panel is preparing to teach online, which we all know is a bit challenging right now. So we have first Dr. Elizabeth Romero. She is a director of Learning and Technologies and Client Service Solutions. We have Sophia Hamilton, director of Disability Resources Center. We also have Victoria Zvoda, PhD students in the physics department. She's also a TA right now. And we'll have Shuvra Debna, a PhD candidate in the Department of Chemistry. So I'm going to give them the floor because we do not have a whole lot of time today. I hope you enjoy this. And if you have any questions, you can just type them in the chat box, right?
Thank you. Thank you, Mirella. I'm very happy to be here with you all today. Over 300 new TAs is so exciting. This is the first time that actually I'm invited to participate in this new TA orientation, and it's the first time that we're doing this online, so I'm double excited about this. Let's jump into things. I wanted to make sure that you knew what teaching and learning technologies you have at your disposal in UIC. Some of the technologies that you actually will see in your colleges are not managed centrally, but what I'm talking today about is about technologies that are managed centrally. Okay, so somebody else is recording the session, right? I don't have to click the record button, or do I have to? Just making sure. Okay, I'm just gonna click the record just in case. And then I'd like to speak with you about some of the online challenges, just to make sure that we all are aware of what those are and available technology resources, where to find more things for teaching with technology. So the first thing, the first website that you need to know where it is the Academic Computer and Communication Center, which we call ACCC, accc.uic.edu, and at the bottom you can see the entire link. This deck will be made available to you. So all the links that I have here, you will be able to go over and review at your on your own time. But what I wanted to make sure that you knew, under services in our website, you have all this collection of links to the specific service categories. So we call service category each one of these highlight submenu: active learning systems, e-learning authoring, lecture capture, media streaming, and so on. So there's a lot of technology that is available for you. You just need to know exactly where they are. So the central location for all the technologies that is supported centrally is this website. So accc.uic.edu. That's one thing. There's a couple of things you should know, that UIC uses Blackboard as the LMS. Blackboard is an LMS that has been in use in UIC for 20 years. If many of you may be familiar with Blackboard, and if you are not familiar with Blackboard, this is something that you will need to right away get familiar with. We offer training and webinars all the time. So we target specific people when we send information to our community regarding webinars that are available. But the one thing that is changing, there's two things that are changing to Blackboard this time. We have a photo roster, which is the built-in tool in Blackboard that allows the students to pronounce their name using this application, to also select the preferred pronouns, and also to have notes that you want your faculty members or the other faculty members in the team to be able to know and see. So as a faculty member, you can use these photo rosters to see the students and to see their pictures and to know the names and pronouns. And then this other piece is that outside login on Blackboard, you can see Socrates, which is a chatbot. This is also new right now. And this is a 24/7 available chatbot that can allow students and faculty interact and find answers to common questions. So we check those two things. Now, how do you go about finding the right technology? There's this handout that we created for faculty and instructors, TAs. If you go to go.uic.edu/teaching with technology, you will find this handout that is organized by different aspects. So detect plagiarism or schedule a lecture class or foster online discussions so that you know by whatever you want to accomplish with your students, there's a technology that probably can support you in doing that via remote or online. Now, all these technologies have been available for UIC, the majority, before the pandemic. So right now, we onboarded a couple of other technologies, Gradescope, Zoom, and also VoiceThread we added to the repository of tools that we have. So if you don't know what those technologies are for, come to this handout, find out where they are, what you can do with them, and also explore the technology. Feel free to let us know if you have any questions. So moving on to the challenges. Technology is very good when you add technology into your courses, but it comes with some challenges. So I wanted to make sure that you could at least conceptually see where those challenges are in the spectrum. So there's some challenges that are instructional in nature, depends on the course and the specific field. There's some challenges that are individual based, so depend on you and the instructor. So what are your own concerns and doubts and challenges on using the technology? And then there's some unsolved challenges that regardless of the university that you work for or the tools that you have at your disposal, there's still some things that are really difficult for the online faculty members and the online community to resolve. So I'm gonna just go over them very quickly. As I mentioned, all these highlighted areas are actually links to specific places in the university websites or the different tools that we have. I didn't want to, just bore you with so many links or confuse you with so many links. So high level, I'm gonna be just talking about where you find these things. You will have access to this presentation, and when you have it, then you click in there and you will be taken to the specific aspect. Where is the QM rubric? What is the QM rubric? All those things you will be able to find out later. Right now, I'm going to tell you that from the three main challenges, instructional, which is organization, interactivity, and engagement, we're going to just cover them all. And I will let you know, you can find solutions, quick solutions. So these are quick solutions to some of those challenges. So UIC just implemented what is the template for navigation in Blackboard. This is per request. You don't have to use it, but it's very recommended. The template shows the number of items on the left-hand side of Blackboard, syllabus announcements, getting started, those kinds of things to compose a clean navigation for students. Selecting the entry point on announcements is very important too. And then label all instructional materials really clearly and consistently. So that's one of the pieces. Now, the second is the university just started being a Quality Matters. QM stands for Quality Matters, a Quality Matters organization, which means that we can use this rubric. This is the rubric. It shows the different aspects of a course, and then on the right side, the number of points that a course can have. Using this rubric will allow you to create courses that are really good quality courses, not from the delivery standpoint, but from the design standpoint. So I recommend you to check them up and make sure that you are, if it's your course, if you are owning a piece of the course, or if it's your responsibility to clean the navigation, that you have a framework on how to go about doing that. Another piece is important. Communication, it becomes critical for online learning. State clear requirements for student interaction. When is office hours? How are they going to see you? What is a good behavior in online discussions, online emails, and any other form of communication? Very important, also part of the QM rubric. And the last piece on organization is the course content. Make sure that the sequence of instructional materials is scaffolded to provide for the most opportunities for students to engage with the content in a more logical way. The use of a weekly content is very important, so that's part of this template that I mentioned. Show how materials are to be used for learning activities, not just list the different activities or different documents in there. Make sure that the students know exactly which files they should look at first, in which order, and why they need to use those files. So those three things, content, navigation, and communication, are very important elements of one of the first challenges that students and faculty face when they go online, which is organization. The second challenge is interactivity. We have different tools at the university to help with interactive content. I would recommend three things that you probably need to be able to look at and see and define whether or not you want to use them. VoiceThread is one of them. So this is the one here. And the links, as I mentioned, goes to specific aspects of how to use these different things and where you can find more information about them. VoiceThread is a video-based asynchronous communication. It's like a discussion board, but with video and rich media reach. So that's one tool. It's fully accessible. So you can, if you create video or audio files, automated closed captioning goes and populate the closed captioning on those elements. That's one. The second one will be Blackboard tests. The Blackboard tool has an embed testing tool that is very good to use for mastering of students' concepts. And then also, if you are not familiar with Panopto, getting into Panopto and learning how to create videos with embedded quizzes can help you also promote this interactivity so that the students can feel that they are interacting with the content and interacting among each other as well. Now, the top part is a little more challenging, but I left these links for you to know where to find e-learning authoring tools that you can use to create little animations or little interactive videos that you can use to guide the students with the most difficult concepts in your courses. Now, the other thing is you can also search repositories of tools. So you don't have to create everything from scratch. If you go to our website, you will find what kinds of other places you can find different, what we call open educational resources. Engagement is the third element of these instructional challenges. So engaging your students can become a challenge when you are online. So make sure that your instructional materials are really nice and they convey concepts easily, organize everything, have students talk to each other, make sure that you create opportunities for the students to interact with you and to interact among themselves with to problem solve and other aspects of the course. So there's different techniques to do this. We don't have time to go in detail of those, but I would recommend that you go and look for a professional learning network on your field of study and look for those opportunities for you to get into the network of people that know and have been doing online learning for longer than you have. The two tools that are very good for collaboration are Google Drive. Obviously, all the students have access to the G Suite, and you do too. And then the discussion boards, the VoiceThread is an added to the discussion board, but those are good, easy ways in which you can facilitate interaction with students. Now, as far as individual challenges, which is the second category of challenges, there's a couple of different challenges in here. Digital literacy, the digital fluency in which you can use technology at ease, makes for one of the biggest probably barriers for faculty adoption of technology. And you as the TA come in handy because you probably have a lot more opportunity to engage with these new technologies than the regular instructor will have. And also you have probably a good opportunity to reach out to the students in the spaces that they already are. So be creative at that digital communication mean. Try to make sure that you are where students are. But again, this depends on your own digital fluency and the way that you can solve problems, because anybody that uses technology will need to at some point troubleshoot for the technology, because technology is just the vehicle and it really can fail at points, and you have to always have backup plans on what to do if the technology fails. Now the other piece is the motivation, and I hope that not because of the pandemic, but because this is a complete new way of doing this for education, especially in UIC, that you can keep the motivation up for you and your students, that this new way of communication, when we need to embrace it, and we need to embrace it and get better at it. Time management is the other piece. I don't know how many of you have more than 5 passwords, but I have like probably 30. And it's not a good practice to have the same password for everything. So if you are not using currently a password management tool, I really recommend you to use one. There's a free version of LastPass. It's a wonderful password management tool. As you engage now in this new venture of being a TA, you might have to have access to different things outside of the university promoted resources, which you can access with your NetID and password. But if you ended up being able or needing to add other passwords, having a password management will be a very good use of your time, and you will facilitate a lot of other things that you need to do. And use technology to boost your productivity, just like learning a new piece of technology every once in a while and adding that to the repertoire of technologies that you can use. It's very important. So that's personal. It's up to you how much you want to invest in your personal technology or digital literacy in general, but I recommend that this is a good time for, embracing this technology and getting motivation to do that. Now, there's a couple of unsolved challenges, and this is actually going to be the segue to the next part of this session. Privacy and student data is one of them. So at University of Illinois at Chicago, we really take privacy and student data and security and student data very seriously. So our chief security officer will make changes to the way we engage with technology, depending on how we are seeing these privacy policies and these companies that are coming up with different ways of using data. So they look into these systems and recommend best practices for us on how to manage the technology. So that's important. And we still don't have bulletproof solutions for privacy and student data. There's still a consideration of limitation of that and what the companies can access from the student data and where the data resides. So there's a lot of conversation in that space in terms of using technology. Access is the other piece, and you as the TA of those courses will need to be very aware that not all the students have access to all the technology, and not all the students have access to multiple devices. So designing your courses and the materials with universal design in mind is very important, but at the same time also providing opportunities for the students to have just accommodations for anything that they might need. That is important to consider as well. And accommodations range from a very, very broad spectrum. So be aware of those. And then the last piece that is still a challenge is the accessibility. So people with documented disabilities in our university can go to the Disability Resource Center, which is the next part of the session today. But there still is, even using the accommodations can still be a challenge for many students to access technology. And the technology is still not what it should be. And incrementally is getting there. So I will let Sophia Hamilton, from the director of the Disability Resource Center, to take it from here. Just one more slide, and this is probably the links that you need to know. You can find us online, but you can also call us, email us. This email will actually create a ticket on our ticketing system, and we can go with you and support you through this ticketing way. Also, answers.uic.edu is our knowledge base. If you need to ask any question, feel free to check that answers website first. And if the answer is not there, you can suggest to add that question and we will answer that and add it to the repository. But also you can reach us out at lts@uic.edu. And with that, I'm taking it back to Sophia.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hey, everyone. My name is Sophia, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm the director of the Disability Resource Center here at UIC. And I understand that you all are going to have access to a video and a presentation that goes a little bit more into sort of the basics of what we do. So I'm going to skip over that, assuming that you've either already seen that video or you will see that video, and highlight a couple important things from our website that have to do with online access and one of the sort of most common mistakes that I see TAs make when it comes to working with our office. So the Disability Resource Center is the office on campus that is responsible for working with students who have documented disabilities to ensure that they are getting accommodations that they need to get equal access to their classes. So accommodations, as Elizabeth mentioned, could range from extra testing time to captioning or ASL sign language services, to things like reasonable flexibility with deadlines or with attendance, any thing that we need to put in place to remove barriers to access for students with all manner of disabilities. So this is our website, drc.uic.edu. And I want to draw your attention to a guide we recently made in collaboration with the Disability Cultural Center and with ACCC. And we put this guide together keeping in mind that it's important that folks on the instructional end, instructors, TAs, feel comfortable implementing accommodations into their classes, but also, as Elizabeth kind of mentioned, with universal design in mind. So in brief, the concept of universal design states that if we design with the folks who are sort of most vulnerable or most likely to get left out in mind, it benefits everyone. So the super classic example is if you put captions on a video, obviously now you're including folks who are maybe deaf or hard of hearing or have an auditory processing disorder. It's going to be crucial for them to get captions, but also it's beneficial for everyone. Almost everyone benefits from a multimodal experience when they're learning, and it's going to especially benefit folks who the sound is broken on their computer, or maybe they're watching on their phone on the train and they can't have the sound on. Hopefully they're not on the train right now. Or folks who are English language learners who benefit from seeing the words as they listen to them. So this guide goes through some sort of universal proactive measures that you can take from the planning and prep stage, including an accessibility statement. We link to places where you can find a syllabus statement, PowerPoint slide, and DRC flyer, to how to be reasonably flexible with attendance and deadlines. Again, universal design measure, sometimes crucial for certain people with disabilities, also going to be extremely helpful and beneficial for your parents who are in your class, folks who are working or are frontline workers in the current situation, or dealing with sort of mental health stuff. And we get into the sort of nitty gritty of how to make your course materials accessible. So in the interest of time, I'm just gonna let you know sort of where this is available, and you can poke around. All of these link to specific guides about making certain formats of materials accessible. And then we go into specifically videos and lecture capture. So if a student needs an accommodation of something like live captioning or ASL, the Disability Resource Center will work with the instructor, potentially the TA, and our vendor to ensure that they're getting that accommodation met from day one. But there are also ways to auto caption materials proactively and then correct the transcript as a universal design and proactive accessibility measure. There are some best practices here for live discussions as well as assessments and tests. So I'll leave it at that so we have time for questions, because I know there's a lot to go over. But also, just so you're aware, the presentation that goes over the entirety of the Disability Resource Center, sort of context and what we do, is available for download here under more resources, presentations for download. There's a lot of good information up here, if I do say so myself. If you want more information about any specific accommodations, we have a little guide here, as well as faculty resources. But before I hand it over to the next presenter, I want to briefly highlight the one mistake that I see TAs make in the couple years that I've been here. And that is on this slide. Generally, I think TAs are really supportive and do a fantastic job of working with students who have letters of accommodation or who request accommodations. The exception being, I have gotten into some sort of complicated conversations where a student has disclosed to their TA, I need a specific kind of accommodation, or they have given their letter of accommodation and said, you know, I need whatever extra time on my test, a little bit of flexibility with arriving late to labs, whatever it is. And in the heat of the moment, that TA, rather than saying, okay, let me think about this or let me get back to you, sort of felt pressure to respond immediately to that student, and said something like, well, I have no idea how we would actually do that, or that doesn't sound reasonable, or simply, no, we're not going to do that, or we can't do that. And I can generalize across all situations here, whether or not that accommodation is reasonable. There should not be a unilateral denial of accommodations coming from a TA. So all you have to say in that kind of situation, if you are not certain how to meet the student's need, or if you're not sure if the need that they're bringing to you is reasonable and something that you can do, is thanks for bringing that to my attention and I will get back to you. Or let me check in with your instructor. I'll get back to you once I have an answer. And then in collaboration with the instructor and potentially with the DRC, we can get that student an appropriate answer. But what you don't want to have to do is create tension between you and the student about whether or not they can get this accommodation, and then potentially create tension between you and the instructor if they have to go back and apologize on your behalf or say, okay, no, we are going to get it figured out. Do not deny accommodations without contacting the Disability Resource Center or your instructor, depending on the circumstance. And you don't have to respond immediately over email. It's even easier. But that is my one sort of takeaway in terms of things that I've seen go awry based on a TA's interaction with a student. So I hope that we have time for questions at the end. I will go ahead and turn it over to the next presenter, and thank you so much for your time.
Okay, I guess that's me. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Zvora, and I'm a PhD student and a physics TA in the Department of Physics here at UIC. So let me just start sharing my screen so I can start right away with the presentation, because we are running a little bit short on time. Okay, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about what I think about keeping it personal during especially this very remote time in teaching this semester, this upcoming semester. By the way, this is my UIC email. Feel free to email with your questions or concerns or just high fives or whatever. So a study shows that a happy student learns better. And that's any study, right? So that's why it's a study. And here's the link to one particular one. So basically, if a student enjoys your class, if they feel that it's personal enough for them, then they will probably learn better. And how can you guarantee, or how can you promote this enjoyment of your class? Well, depending on the size of your class, you can always ask students to personally introduce themselves and their pronouns and chosen or desired major and why they are taking your class. And of course, if your class is huge and you're doing it on Zoom, then it might take 2 hours. So instead, you can also ask them to fill out a short questionnaire. However, make sure you read the replies and keep it in mind, and maybe even bring it up later during your instructions that one of the students wants to pursue biochemistry major or they chosen a philosophy major. Address the replies in your instructions as well, if it's possible. I'm going to echo Marco and Arjun. Remember the names if possible. If not possible, still remember the names. Print out the class roster, and I think Elizabeth showed it on her in her presentation that there is a class photo roster available, option available on Blackboard. So make sure you find it and utilize the tool. And always, I think that's helpful in terms of engagement in your class. If you're doing it on Zoom, ask students to turn on the video. They don't have to be, you know, always present there, but it's also very hard to see if a student gets anything from your teaching if their video is blank and you don't even know if they were present during your session. Now, ask for their feedback and ask it multiple times during the semester, not just in a form of teaching evaluation that's done at the end of semester. That's not very helpful because you can only implement it in the future sessions. You cannot implement it on the fly. So ask for feedback multiple times during the semester. Read it and ask also for personal feedback during office hours. Do hold office hours, please. That is very helpful for students to come one-on-one, even if it's virtual office hour, come one-on-one with their questions and have a chat with you, whether it's regarding the subject or some other matters. If you are an international TA and if you have an accent, or if you are not an international TA and also have an accent, address it. Address the fact that sometimes you may mispronounce words. Sometimes it will be hard to understand your speech. So encourage students to ask you to repeat whatever you said. For me, as a native Russian speaker, sometimes I explain physics in the phrases and examples that I was taught when I was an undergrad. So sometimes it doesn't really click right away with my undergrad students here. So I encourage them to clarify from me if something is not clear or if they didn't catch any of my wonderful jokes. Be more than a TA for them. That also makes it, helps it to make it personal. Mentor, for example, ask them their career aspirations. You can only imagine how their faces light up when you ask them about their career aspirations and plans and what they already have done for it, how many tests they've taken and how hard it is. It's really valuable to have those conversations with your students. Maybe you can be a good source regarding grad school if they're going to grad school. Maybe you know some tips and tricks that are not found on Google. And also what I found helps in instruction is to be students' ally. If you have a very mean professor, or if the professor is not really mean, ally yourself with your students, be on their side. Professionally appropriate on their side, do not, do not talk bad behind your professor's back. However, be on their side. Make sure they feel that you are with them on quizzes, on helping to prepare them for quizzes, for tests, for exams, and you understand that sometimes it's really hard to learn, especially on Zoom. So be their ally. And the last slide, I guess, that I have, and I'm still on time. Don't be too hard on yourself. You are still just a TA, teaching assistant. You are assistant teaching, not a full-time professor. You have your own stuff to worry about. You have your classes, you have your research. You have other personal stuff to worry about. Make sure you arm yourself with resources that are available on campus. Those resources are ample. There's Counseling Center, there's Career Advice Center, there are multiple student organizations, there are civil rights organizations, there are unions. Make sure you know about those resources and you can always refer your students to them. And the last, but definitely not least, if you enjoy teaching, there is a higher chance you're good at it. So please make sure you find fun in it. And as a part of graduate school, I feel like that's our job description, to make challenging and hard things as fun as possible. So good luck in teaching, good luck this semester. Okay, so we have 6 more minutes. Should we address a couple of questions? Shubra, do you want to read them to Sophia and Elizabeth?
I just wanted to check if Shuvra would like to say anything, or if we should open up the last 6 minutes for questions.
All right, it's my pleasure to talking to you guys, and welcome to UIC in this semester. So most of the thing like Victoria covered that we need in here. but a couple of things like we are in a middle of pandemic, so you will see some student will get sick and some students family could get sick. So there is an regulation we have, like a student have to submit the doctor's note if they get sick. So maintain that document like on time and keep it with you. End of the semester professor usually inflexible during this pandemic, as I saw in last semester, but still keep it with you. If they ask, you can show the documents. That is one point. And as Mitra said, like all the class will be in online, so maintain the timeline, like come 10 minutes before, prepare yourself accordingly. And another point I want to make, like whatever you teach in office hour during the class, just be there, be very friendly with them, show them like you are passionate about your teaching, you'll really like them. If you are friendly with them and if they feel you really like them, you will be fine. They will like you and it would be really conducive teaching environment. Still, we are not seeing each other in person in the class. Still they feel like, okay, my teacher really care about us, so we could like learn something from him. So yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shubhra. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We have some questions in the chat. We had questions in the chat box, but most of them were answered. I know the participants did not have access to all of the questions and all of the answers. So what we're doing is we copy the questions and answers into a document, and we're going to be making that all accessible to everyone. However, there were a couple of questions that did not get answered. So I wanted to make sure we ask those. So the first question, I believe, will go to Sophia. The question was, are there resources available to navigate teaching with a disability? For example, a medical condition that may require immediate intervention during instruction time.
Sure, yeah, good question. And also apologies, I didn't realize that everyone couldn't see the question. So sorry.
That's okay.
If that was confusing.
Just a little bit of technical glitches over here.
Got it. Okay, so that's a really good question. So the Disability Resource Center works directly with students to facilitate accommodations. There is an office on campus, the Office for Access and Equity, that will support individuals who are employees who have disabilities. So in terms of more technical support, if you need any kind of accommodation as an employee, I would recommend going to the Office for Access and Equity, oae.uic.edu. In terms of just strategic support or sort of ideas or like working through stuff, I want to plug an office that I believe is speaking in the next panel, which is the Disability Cultural Center. They're a fantastic place to just kind of workshop ideas and talk through things if you are an individual with a disability and you're trying to navigate specific sort of concerns or strategies like that. I think they have all kinds of check-in hours and things that you can consult and talk through those kinds of things. So I would recommend either.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. We had one last question, we have time for it. I'm not sure who will answer this question, so I'm going to put it out there for everyone. Does UIC or the DRC have general guidelines for accommodations due to pandemic-related illness or of themselves or loved ones? So I think they mean the students themselves or the TA themselves or loved ones.
I can take a stab at this. So the guidelines for students are that if a student is concerned about coming onto campus because of their own condition or their own sort of disability, for example, you know, I have asthma, so I am more high risk, or I have obsessive compulsive disorder, I can't be in a room with a bunch of other people who might be sick, they can register with the Disability Resource Center and we will work one-on-one with their instructor and the student to ensure their access. For students who do not themselves have disabilities, but maybe are living with a high-risk loved one or have childcare concerns or transportation concerns, other sort of COVID-related concerns. The students are being directed to speak directly with their instructors, and you can potentially reach out to, say, advisors in the college or other support folks in the student affairs office of your college if you need support having that conversation. If you're asking from the employee standpoint, similar. If you need accommodations because of a disability, you'd go through OAE. If you need accommodations unrelated to a disability, that's being handled unit by unit. So your specific college and potentially even the department within your college would be able to make that call as to how to make sure that you are safe and your needs are being met. So I hope that answers the question from all different potential angles.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your participation, for answering questions in the chat box and live. And yeah, thank you so much for all of your work. We are done with this panel and about to start the next one. Bye. Okay, everyone, we're going to move on with the next panel, the third one. And after this panel, we'll have a little break. So this panel is called Culture and Diversity, Inclusive Teaching at UIC. We're going to have Dr. Margaret Fink, Director of the Disability Cultural Center, Dr. Zaina Zatari, Director of the Arab American Cultural Center, Dr. Cynthia Blair, Director of the African American Cultural Center, and Bailey Sustak, TA and PhD student in philosophy, and Zoe Sheets, TA and M2 student in the College of Medicine. So I'm going to open the floor to you, and I'll be monitoring questions.
Hello, everyone. Can you see me? Because on the screen, Margaret's name is on my picture, so I'm not sure what's happening.
We can see you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Cynthia Blair, and as Maria just said, I am the director of the African American Cultural Center, and I'm joined by Margaret Fink and Zaina Zatari of the Disability Cultural Center and the Arab American Cultural Center, respectively. And we are really happy to join you today for this TA orientation. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that this part of the presentation will be a PowerPoint, and that PowerPoint will be available and accessible at the following URL. And if Margaret or if someone wants to put that in the chat, you can do that, but I'll read it out. It is lowercase bit dot lowercase ly / access, ACCESS, all lowercase, and then uppercase CCUSC. Okay. All right. So we are 3 centers which are part of 7 centers for cultural understanding and social change here at UIC. And I'll just tell you all of the cultural centers, though you will get a little information about each of them later on in the presentation. So of the 7, 3 of us are here: the African American Cultural Center, the Arab American Cultural Center, the Disability Cultural Center. We also have the Women's Leadership and Resource Center, the Latino Cultural Center, the Gender and Sexuality Center, the Asian American Resource and Cultural Center. And did I miss anything, Margaret or Zaina? I think that's
No, I think that's it. I'll share the screen for the PowerPoint just so folks can see it, if that's okay.
Okay.
While you're talking, does that make sense?
Yeah. Will I be able to maneuver through it, or should I just ask you next slide?
You can ask me next slide, or if you want to upload, share screen it, then you could just maneuver through it, whatever is easiest.
All right, let me try.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so today we have been asked to talk to you about the inclusive classroom. And so what we are doing in our presentation today is trying to think broadly about inclusivity on campus and inclusivity in the classroom, but also, you know, we need to try to figure out how our centers are connected to this broader theme of inclusivity. So what we'd like to do today is highlight the ways that the centers provide support to the inclusive classroom, right? And expand that definition beyond the classroom itself. So our presentation is titled, Engaged Learning, Building Student Success Beyond the Classroom. So before we talk about that, I just want to give you, to answer questions about who we are as the Centers for Cultural Understanding and Social Change. As I said, we are 7 distinct cultural centers, and each of us has its own history and mission and location on campus. Our oldest center was created in the 70s, and our youngest center, which is the Arab American Cultural Center, was, Zaina, when was that? Like 2018, 2017?
2016.
Oh my God.
And technically the DCC came right after, but you know, because they came out of the DRC, you know, it's hard to tell when exactly is the formation, but yes.
That's right.
October 2016.
So each of these centers, you know, has different histories here on campus, but they're all the product of student activism and community activism, joining together to try to address a really important and felt need among students, but also among community members for creating something on campus that promotes the well-being of students, the well-being of faculty, staff, and as well as community members. And that allows all members of our broad community to share and understand perspectives of each of our historically marginalized groups. So each of our centers offers a variety of programs and services and lends our expertise in a variety of ways, again, on campus and beyond. And Zaina, was my screen sharing not working? Oh, okay.
Yeah, the slide wasn't showing, so can everybody now see the PowerPoint itself?
Yes, now we can.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just move through, Cynthia. Don't worry about it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So each of our centers offers a variety of programs, as I started to say, and has developed quite a range of expertise that we use, obviously, in the center, but we provide to units and classrooms and faculty and other, you can back up one slide, Zaina, on campus, to connect what we do to the communities and the identities that each of us represents. Though each of our centers is unique, we share core values, and each of us is committed to intersectional approaches to exploring the cultures, the history, the experiences of the marginalized communities that we work for. And because of that shared, you know, that shared mission and shared ideas, we collaborate on a lot of projects and initiatives. So we're a collective, though we're separate in our distinct, often in our distinct work. So what does this have to do with the inclusive classroom? Well, we promote engaged learning beyond the classroom, but also, as I've said before, in support of what goes on in the classroom, and that these are together like the kind of interrelated pillars of student success here at UIC. So we're kind of encouraging TAs to think obviously about what happens in the classroom to create an inclusive environment, but to also look beyond the classroom to invite students to move beyond the classroom, but also to use the kinds of expertise that each of our centers offers as you're developing ways to create an inclusive environment for your students. The centers are housed in the office of the Vice Provost for Diversity, just so you know. So next slide, please. All right, so what do the centers do? In all of our programming, we promote inclusivity, the full inclusion and participation of the communities and the students that we serve through engaged programming, intercultural dialogue, vibrant scholarship, internships, mentorships, and community partnerships, all focused on social justice. And that's kind of a broad kind of grab bag of things that we do, right? But as you'll see in the later, in the coming slides, you'll see what that actually means. What does engaged programming look like, and how you can actually tap into that and maybe pull it into your classrooms. The center serves students as a hub for belonging and engagement and collaboration. And one of the core values that link all of our centers is this real commitment to and an understanding of the need for student belonging in a campus, in a city where that belonging is constantly being challenged and undermined. So how do we create that for students, and how do we try to build that out into the broader UIC community? We'll do that through an array of engaged learning opportunities, right? And again, we'll talk a little about that in upcoming slides. But these engaged learning initiatives are definitely for students, but they're a way to link faculty, staff, students, and community members in a way of validating and thinking about the experiences of marginalized groups. We're also engaged in activism and advocacy, and that is fitting since each of our centers is born out of activism and advocacy. We invite students and all members of the UIC community to think broadly about the historical and ongoing struggle and resistance and push for social change, both within the university and beyond. Right. So I think one thing I'd like TAs and faculty to think about is that, you know, what happens in the classroom is certainly linked to the kinds of work that happens on campus beyond the classroom, but also what happens in the larger community. And sometimes it's easy to kind of separate the classroom and what happens there from, you know, things that are going on outside. But I think it's quite obvious that that separation often kind of contributes to a classroom that actually isn't inclusive. So what is an inclusive classroom? Just put a couple of ideas here to kind of spark thinking about what an inclusive classroom looks like. One, inclusive classrooms are welcoming learning environments. They acknowledge and support the diverse academic, social, and communication needs of all students. In the inclusive classroom, the instructor and students work together to create and sustain an environment in which everyone feels safe, supported, and encouraged to excel and to express their views and concerns. Inclusive classrooms are places in which thoughtfulness, mutual respect, and academic excellence are valued. And because of the position of the slide, I can't really read that bottom line. but you get the point, right? That the inclusive classroom is a place that supports the whole student, that invites the whole student to participate. And I would also add that recognizes the challenges that students face in our current environment, in our current learning environment as specifically, whether that is around issues of accessibility, whether it's about kind of recognizing and accommodating different living situations that might challenge students to be full participants in the class, or any kind of external demand that all of our students at UIC face that again challenge their full participation, or that might at points challenge, create challenges for them as they seek to participate fully in class. Next slide. I want to take a moment right now just to ask Margaret or Zaina if they have any thoughts that they'd want to add before we move into a discussion of the individual centers.
Hi, this is Margaret. Thanks for asking, Cynthia. Thank you for the introduction to the centers. It's tricky just because we have 7 centers doing so much. And like Cynthia was saying, we are also really interested in being a collective. So I think in this next portion, as we go somewhat quickly through each of the centers with some examples of what we do, I think we are really just hoping to let you all know that we are here. We are here for the communities that you and or your students may or may not belong to. We are also very much invested, all of us, in engaging with people who don't necessarily belong to the communities that we primarily serve, but to support just a more inclusive culture at UIC broadly. So yeah, I think my addition.
Okay, all right. All right, well then, as you see on your screen, this, not that it's relevant right now, but that was a map of our centers. And eventually, hopefully soon, we can all kind of return to campus and make our way to all these centers, and hopefully you can send your students to our centers to engage in, you know, the amazing programming that we all at each of our centers creates each year for students, each semester for students, and for faculties and TAs who are seeking to engage in the work that we do to support our students. So we can talk about the individual centers now.
Okay, so I'll try to go as quickly as possible. I noticed someone mentioned or asked a question about how to deal with students that are not inclusive. I mean, we're hoping to answer questions towards the end, but maybe some of what we show can help illuminate some of that. So we do a lot of different kinds of programs that are all open to the public and free, that includes students, faculty, and staff. For the Arab American Cultural Center, one of our events is called Hiwar Maftuh, which is public conversations, and it ranges from having student-led discussion sessions, students meaning our student workers at the center, who would bring up a specific issue or topic that is on their minds, that is a challenge, etc. And we sit around and they prepare some discussion conversation around it. At the same time, sometimes we also invite public speakers who will shed light on a specific issue. Sometimes they are community activists, organizers, sometimes they're artists, sometimes they're other academics doing research on these specific sets of issues. And so, you know, one way to approach folks who are not necessarily being inclusive is to, especially as a TA, like encourage them to go and listen to other kinds of perspectives, try to understand cultures, you know, and people coming from different backgrounds. And all the centers present such kinds of opportunities. So the Latino Cultural Center, which is the oldest on campus, also has these arts-based civic dialogues and tour initiatives. The Latino Cultural Center has a mural in the gallery upstairs, and the mural acts as a really important visual place to kind of conduct some of these dialogues. And they focus a lot on exploring topics of immigration, environmental and climate justice issues, connecting kind of history to identity, also to the sciences and the science fields, and how our identity shows up in these various places. And then the Heritage Garden program is a program that is an intercultural, meaning all the cultural centers participate in creating this program, and it offers an internship for students from across the campus to take care of this of the Heritage Garden itself, but also to go through a curriculum that will focus on issues around environment sustainability, cultural diversity, and social justice. And each of the centers spends about a week in the summer with the interns speaking about a specific set of issues, going in depth in how these issues translate in the various communities that we come from. And the Heritage Garden also offers tours and conversations. So besides the internship, there are other ways students who aren't signing up for the internship can also participate in something like this. Cynthia.
Okay. The African American Cultural Center, like all the other centers, supports the academic and diversity mission of the university, and invites students to really think deeply, creatively, and critically about Black diasporic traditions, histories, experiences, and cultures, right? And the center envisions itself as a place for a safe and brave space for exploration and engaging ideas about social justice, social change, and about Black identities diasporically. Right? So we at the center, one of the programs that we kind of use to highlight all of our concerns and to draw students into conversation about Black expressive culture and histories is called Black Table Talks. And that is, has been a weekly conversation that allows students to engage in analysis of a cultural text, whether it's reading or art or music or visual culture of some sort, and to use that as a means of community building, leadership training, as well as real interrogation of the politics of Black life and culture in the US and more broadly. And one of the main goals of this is to build community and belonging within the university, and to create and use the cultural center as a space where conversations that may not happen elsewhere can happen. So I think one of the interesting things that links all the centers is this focus on kind of conversation, that we are kind of creating programs that allow students to engage each other, and to engage in critical, brave and safe dialogue around important contemporary as well as historical issues. That's one of our programs. Next. Zaina, can you go to the next slide, or is it not working?
I did. Can you see it? I think we maybe want to go like quickly to one of the other centers so Margaret can jump in because we have like a couple of minutes left.
Okay. I think you guys were frozen for a second, or I was frozen. The Gender and Sexuality Center, like the other center, is about inclusivity and brave inclusivity for the purpose of catalyzing change. And one of their programs is Tea Time, which is an intentional space, thank you, which is an intentional space where students can gather to discuss topics around heteronormativity and transphobia and other topics that promote a deeply engaged and life-affirming space that can lead to social change and social action. And as I was saying, this is yet another example of the ways that the centers create conversations to support student understanding and to create community at each of the centers. Margaret, you can go next.
Hi, is my sound and video working? Okay, so just to highlight a few more, there's 7 centers. We're about, I think, a little more than halfway through. So the Disability Cultural Center is another one of the centers. We're all about thinking about disability as a social justice issue and a site for identity, community, and culture. And we do a series called Unlearning Ableism, which is all about sharing our stories and also engaging with like a podcast or a video from disability culture. We're doing that as a recording in the time of COVID, so we'll see how that goes. It'll be like a live podcast. And if we could go to the next slide. The Asian American Resource and Cultural Center also has a really amazing series called Lunchbox Series. And as you might guess, it's over lunch, and sometimes it's a discussion of a movie, sometimes it's a guest from an organization in Chicago. And it's another opportunity to just sort of be exposed to new ideas and new people and new efforts in Chicago and on campus. And then the Women's Leadership and Resource Center is focused on feminism in all kinds of ways. I mean, it's an amazing center with, in particular, this slide is highlighting a wellness program, which is just spaces for people to get together and think through creative, scholarly approaches to healthy relationships and healing from trauma and wellness, generally speaking. So if we can go to the next slide. We really want to underline that the centers are a resource for you and your students. So we have our contact information, our website. Please find us on social media. That's where you can learn about a lot of our events and a lot of ways to get involved. And I believe we've also put together a few resources about inclusive teaching. So with that, I think we want to turn it over to some of the other speakers so that we can give them some time.
Great, thanks, Margaret. I think that I am up next. So I am going to screen share, make sure that I put it in presentation mode. And after I screen share, if someone could just confirm for me that you can see the PowerPoint, I would really appreciate it.
We can see it, Zoe.
Beautiful, thank you so much. So my name is Zoe and I use she, her pronouns. I'm going to be talking today about creating accessible classrooms. And I just want to start by talking a little bit about the positionality that I come to this conversation with. So I have been at UIC for a very long time in terms of being a student. I was an undergraduate student here and I got my master's of public health here, and now I'm a medical student here. So I've experienced a lot of different types of classrooms as a student with a disability. I've also been a TA and I've also been an instructor creating my own classroom. So I come at this from a couple of different perspectives. I also have always been in my time here an activist and have had the pleasure of chairing several of the disability activism committees at UIC, including the one that led the charge to create the Disability Cultural Center. So I'm always so happy. My heart feels so warm when I get to hear an update on what the DCC is doing. Just a little bit more about me. I do identify as disabled, sometimes visibly and sometimes invisibly disabled, depending on if I'm using a mobility aid. I'm queer, I'm white, and I'm a cisgender woman. I name those things because some of those points are points of privilege and some are not. And I think it's incredibly important that we're aware of kind of who is talking to us and what perspective they're coming from. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some disability concepts and disability culture. I want to be clear that there will be some overlap with what Sophia likely told you earlier, but I'm going to say some of the same things because they're so important. So this presentation is the baby version of an 1.5 hour long talk that myself and many other disabled students created. And I think it's important for you to know that, because that means that the things I've selected are the things that dozens of disabled students specifically said, we want our instructors to know this. So that's kind of how I went about deciding what to include today. First and foremost, we're talking about the Disability Resource Center, the Disability Cultural Center, but for some folks attending, disability may not be a familiar concept. There also may be people attending who have disabilities. We're kind of all along a different spectrum of understanding this concept of disability. So a quick note on language before I jump into some definitions and some words that we'll be using. Identity first language is when we put the identity literally in our language, in the language itself before the person. So disabled person. Person first language means that in our statement, the word person comes before the identity, person with a disability. There are various reasons that people with disabilities prefer either one of these things. So for myself, my disability is a really important and powerful social and political identity. So I prefer to be known as a disabled person. I like that it kind of captures how much my disability impacts my life. For other folks, particularly people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who have been told by society that they may be less intelligent or less than because of their disability, the person first language can be a really powerful way of reclaiming their humanity and their personhood with their disability, not instead of or to erase their disability, but as a yes and, I am fully human and I have this disability. Both are okay, so I use both. But if you have a friend or a student or a colleague with a disability, ask them what their preference is and try your best to use whatever that preference is around them. Both are okay. What is not okay is euphemisms. So euphemisms meaning things that try to erase the experience of disability, like saying, handy capable or someone with different abilities. Kind of shying away from that word disabled often tells us that you are uncomfortable with the idea of disability, or you think that disability is bad. So you're trying to find a more comfortable, easier, kinder word. But in reality, saying disability or disabled is totally okay, because being disabled or having a disability is totally okay. And then I think at this point you have been familiarized with what the DRC and DCC are, but since I talk about both in my presentation, Disability Resource Center is DRC and Disability Cultural Center is DCC. When we think about disability, one thing I really want to kind of drive home is that disability, similar to race and gender and many other identities, is socially constructed. So an impairment, oops. I apologize. Siri thought that I was speaking to her and popped up herself. So when we're defining disability, impairment is the thing within the mind or body that causes the mind or body to function differently. Disability is what happens when someone with an impairment loses opportunities to participate in social, physical, or in social life, in academic life, in some aspect of society because of social, physical, or environmental barriers. So while there's still no shame around the word disability, it's really important to note that disability is created and environments themselves are what is disabling. We want to make sure that our classrooms are not further disabling our students. So disability is incredibly diverse. So many types of disabilities exist in the world. Sometimes it's apparent and sometimes it's not, which means when you look at your classroom, it's not going to be obvious whether or not you have a disabled student. It's not just one experience. So even people who have my exact same diagnosis may experience their disability incredibly different than me. And it's not a bad word. So there's actually an entire campaign called #SayTheWord, which is capturing what I said earlier about don't use euphemisms. It's okay to just say disabled. In short, it's unifying, not universal. There's a really strong community of disabled folks, an incredibly beautiful community, but the experiences of the people that make up that community are not universal. So different types of disabilities, which I'm just naming because I want you to have an understanding of how many different types of folks may be in your classroom. There are folks who are capital D deaf, meaning they consider themselves a linguistic minority. There may be folks who are lowercase d deaf, meaning they consider themselves disabled because of their hearing loss. There are folks who are hard of hearing, and there are all kinds of spectrums of hearing loss. The same goes for blindness and being low vision. There are mobility impairments, psychiatric disabilities or mental illness, autism spectrum, intellectual and developmental disabilities, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic illness, learning disabilities, and so many more. You will almost always have a disabled student in your classroom, even if they don't give you an LOA. So even if a student doesn't request accommodations, they may still be there in the room trying to learn and in need of you to consider accessibility. The reason that this is true is because there's so much stigma around disability and disclosure that it's pretty common for a student to decide not to seek formal accommodations from the DRC, even if they are living with a disability. So the 3 key A's are ableism, access, and accommodation. We're going to talk a little bit about these in the context of the classroom. Ableism is essentially discrimination against people with various disabilities, and it really centers on the idea that these people can't be productive or fully functioning members of society without them being in some way fixed. So ableism is discrimination or prejudice against individuals with any type of disability. Accessibility is really having equitable access to the same resources, experience, etc. as everyone else, and sometimes having additional materials or resources so that you can achieve the same experience as those around you. Having the supports necessary to utilize all of these resources, and having a safe space, similar to what Dr. Blair was explaining earlier, where all identities are embraced and not shamed. I want to be really, really clear that accessibility is a broad concept and accommodations are only one tiny piece of it. So accommodations are given to one person to meet that one person's needs. Accessibility applies to an entire space, and it can create a space that is so accessible, people might not even need accommodations. The goal always being accessibility or universal design, but knowing that we may not always have the resources we need to create a fully accessible space, we rely on accommodations in the meantime to make sure that there's an even playing field for everyone who's present. I wanted to emphasize this because, like I said, you may have students that don't request accommodations, but still have a need for accessibility. So at the end of this presentation, I'll be sending you a handout that includes 24 ways you can make your classroom more accessible. I checked, about 20 of them still apply, even if you're teaching over Zoom. The other 4 you can keep in mind when you're back in the physical classroom. But there are ways you can create an accessible space so that even those students who don't have LOAs can fully participate. To make your classroom accessible, know that this matters for many ways or for many reasons, but it can do more than just increase accessibility for your disabled students. It matters because it increases that access and because disabled students matter. But I also think it's fun to think about the other ways it can contribute to our learning environment, such as challenging both you and the students to engage with material in all kinds of different ways, challenging you to improve teaching skills and be creative in your ways of teaching, providing multiple approaches so that all students can increase understanding, and then of course making sure that all students can succeed and achieve the learning outcomes that you and the professor have set forth. Letters of accommodation, I've already mentioned Sophia's mentioned for sure what they are. I've kind of mentioned why they matter. But I want to make 2 things very, very clear, because as a disabled student, I have been disappointed that many of my instructors aren't aware that LOAs do not exist to advantage disabled students, but rather to fill in the gap created when lack of accessibility disadvantages disabled students. It's to create an even playing field, not to put disabled students at an advantage. And then second, it is absolutely against the law to ask students about the specifics of their disability. And even if it wasn't against the law, I personally feel it's just not morally okay to ask someone about their personal medical history. Sometimes, however, there can be an incredible pride in someone's specific disability. So they may tell you anyway, they may express it anyway, and it's okay to acknowledge that and respond to that. You just can't ask the diagnosis yourself. A few things about LOAs being presented to you is if the student doesn't request to meet with you about their LOA, offer it. Make sure that they know it's not mandatory, but express that you would really like to learn how you can support them best, and take the time to listen closely to that student when they talk to you about their needs. Please acknowledge and respect that they are the expert of their own needs and know best what they will need in the classroom to succeed. Clearly express how you're going to meet their access needs, what you will do in the classroom to fulfill their LOA. And then this one's critical, but personally, I think it's one of the hardest parts, is name when you're confused. Be transparent and say, I'm not actually sure how I can make this part accessible to you, but I'm dedicated to figuring it out. Be honest when you're not sure about something. The student may have recommendations themselves, but if they don't, ask if it's okay for you to talk to their accommodation specialist at the DRC to make sure they have full access. On this slide, there are several examples of accessible practice. I'm only going to name 2 for the sake of time, but as I said, all of them are on the handout that you will be receiving. So one that I think is going to be really interesting in the time of COVID is permitting students to come and leave during class. So personally, as someone with chronic pain, when I have had professors who make it challenging to leave and then re-enter class, I don't do well in those classes because I need to be able to get up and stretch and care for my body to keep my pain levels within the right kind of range for me to be able to learn in class. When teachers, however, have encouraged that, I can easily leave for 3 to 4 minutes, stretch, take my medication, and come back and be ready to re-engage. This includes on Zoom, which might mean that students who are participating suddenly turn off their video and stop responding for a few moments, and that's okay. Encourage that if that's what they need to succeed in class. And then the second thing is having PowerPoints and available slides or notes available before class. I think this is also unique in the time of COVID in that we'll be screen sharing rather than just presenting in the classroom the way we normally might with, you know, an HDMI cable or a projector or something like that. But it stays just as important that students have the notes beforehand so they can prepare whatever they need to accessibly take notes during your lecture. Finally, lastly, 10 minutes is not enough to talk through all these concepts of disability culture, all these definitions and resources and accessibility practices. But I want to just kind of leave you with the idea that this is a launch pad for learning more. So please know that inevitably, having just been a person that exists in the world, you have probably been exposed to some harmful and untrue ideas about disability. And so I encourage you to really approach your interactions with your disabled students with a receptive stance, being receptive to wherever they may be in terms of their disability, which could be, wow, I didn't even know I had a disability and college is really hard. So now I'm kind of learning that I have a disability and I'm just now coming into the disability community, just now learning about accommodations. Or it could be someone like me who's been disabled since I was a kid and is very comfortable with that idea and socially identifies, publicly identifies as disabled. There's a wide spectrum and we have to create space for all of it. The best way to do that is keep engaging your individual students, ask them where they're at and what they need. There is a book that I want to highlight that's available in the DCC physically, and I'm sure Margaret and I can talk about how to get it to folks when we can't go to the DCC, but I wanted to highlight, shameless plug, I wrote one of the chapters in this book, but every single chapter was written by a different disabled student, and as a whole, it creates such a vast picture of how to create accessible classrooms. And then last but not least, you will get the handout with more information, including contact info for myself, the DRC, and the DCC. But if you want to screenshot it, my contact information is also on here, and I can take questions in the chat box as we're kind of wrapping up the presentations. Thanks so much.
All right, so that, are y'all able to see and hear me?
Yes, Bailey.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't see myself, so I wasn't sure. I am going to share a handout that has a bunch of resources about inclusive teaching in the chat, and that I'm just going to very briefly sort of go over real quick. That way you have a sense of what you're looking at, but then can explore it on your own time. As soon as I figure out how to, here we go, share screen. So just to give you a little bit of an introduction, I am Bailey from Philosophy and the Gender Women's Studies departments, and I've been doing a lot of research on inclusive teaching and working with people like Michelle Parker-Katz, who spoke to you guys earlier this morning, as well as Dean Colley and Erin O'Leary with CERTL and the Center for Teaching Excellence. And I just want to focus really quick on what are the ways that you can do inclusive teaching in the classroom. So we've been hearing a lot about a lot of great resources from the different cultural centers about disability and accessibility and universal design, which are fabulous. But what are some things that you want to focus on when you're thinking about leading your discussion sections or leading your labs? And so here on this first page is a set of inclusive teaching principles. And you can, sort of read those on your own, but key ones have to do with structure. So something like when you are giving students assignments, making sure that you're giving them lots of instructions, that they're not just sort of thrown into this openly. But also, if you can give them explicit instructions, like if you say, I want you to write a paper about this thing, say, okay, here's the kind of thing that I want you to do. Let's workshop what an introduction should look like and what it should include and not include. The more information that you can give to your students, again, to sort of borrow this term of leveling the playing field, is that way, regardless of their background or their academic preparedness, depending on their previous education, they're all coming into the assignment and all coming into the classroom at the same point. And that is something else I want to highlight. So accessibility, the way that Zoe was talking about, is super important, as is all of the identity aspects that the different cultural centers were highlighting. and being attentive to the situatedness of your students. So socioeconomic, racial, gender, sexuality, all of these things have an impact on what they're bringing to the classroom and what they don't have available to them that other students might. So the idea of inclusive teaching is to let as many students, to get all of your students, hopefully, but as many students as possible to learn as much as possible. So other things to think about are, what are ways that you can be flexible with your assignments? So are there different ways to have participation that it's not just, you know, the loudest or the most confident person talks all the time and the quiet introverted kids just don't get any participation points? Are there ways that you can, for instance, in a small group, assign roles so that everybody has a speaking opportunity, everybody's doing something that's contributing to the learning activity, right? Things like growth mindset, academic belonging. So what are the ways that your students are connected to your class? Can you use examples that aren't just, you know, to give an example, I used to use pop culture references and like Disney movies from my childhood. Back when I taught at a university that was mostly white kids from the same background I did. And then I got to UIC and I was like, okay, nobody knows these references. Also, I'm just too old. They don't watch the same things. So can you find examples, or better yet, get them to bring in examples that speak to their interests and their connections. I was thoroughly educated on YouTube influencer culture by my students this last semester. I don't even know if that's the right terminology, but giving them the ability to bring themselves into the class, into the content, and that's really going to get them just to fall in love with the topic. Like the more they care about it, the more they're going to put into it and try to learn it. And so lastly, the other thing I want to, if I can change this picture real quick, is just, this is a list of, some of these are resources that you've gotten links from other people in this presentation or otherwise. But these are either to articles, websites, or books that are going to give you some tools for inclusive teaching. Don't panic and think, oh my God, this is too much. Pick one thing, look at it, read about it a little bit, think about how you can apply it in your classroom. And then as you go through your teaching career, you can keep adding more and more and more. And I'm gonna stop there.
All right, Bailey. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating today. Thank you for helping out. Thank you for being here. We're going to take a short break, a 9-minute break, and come back at 4:20. And do come back, because we're going to talk about stress in the classroom, stressed and distressed students, and how to manage stress in the classroom. And the resources are very, very useful for TAs. So we're going to take a little break now, and we'll see you in 9 minutes. Bye, everyone.
Oh.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back from the break. We're about to get started with our last panel of the day. So we're going to be hearing from our last group of speakers about a very important topic, stressed and distressed students, how to manage student emotions in the classroom. We'll be hearing from Dr. Grace Gidgoud, who's a clinical assistant professor in the clinical psychology program and supervisor in Office of Applied Psychological Services, or OAPS. We'll hear from Dr. Johanna Strokoff, the Assistant Director for Outreach and a staff psychologist in the Counseling Center. We'll hear from Lisa Berube, the Graduate Student Specialist in the Sociology Department. And finally, last but not least, we'll be hearing from Alejandra, or Ale Medina, who's an experienced TA and a PhD candidate in public administration. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to whoever is speaking first.
Okay, and Megan, is it possible for me to be able to share my slides if I can be the host for?
Yeah, you should have screen sharing ability, so.
Great. So some of us have some PowerPoints to review, and Lisa, I'm aware that you are going to chime in as well. So feel free to join our presentation, even though we don't have you formally in the slides, but to chime in as you would like. Okay. So welcome all. It's a pleasure for us to be presenting to you, given that TAs are often the first people that may notice distress among students. And so it's great to be able to speak directly to you. I'm sure it's been a long day of orientation with a lot of information coming your way, but it's an honor to be wrapping up with the four of us speaking to you all. Again, my name is Johanna. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the staff psychologists at the Counseling Center. So the four of us will be talking to you about stress in general and how to identify stress among your students and some ways to intervene. Certainly we know that academics in general is a stressful process. And here we are on top of the day-to-day stressors of our typical lives, being a student and being a TA, on top of experiencing a global pandemic. And certainly a lot of unrest in our country regarding marginalization of certain communities, racism, politics. There's a lot that's overlapping that's adding to how we are experiencing stress, and it's adding to our role of how we help others. But certainly some themes that we've been seeing regarding how students may be experiencing stress during the COVID era is a lot of anxiety or feeling overwhelmed with regards to themes related to uncertainty. And I'm sure you experience it too, not knowing what your classes will look like. So much of our plans for this semester are changing by the day. So your students not knowing if their academics will be interrupted, if they'll be able to get the degrees they're hoping to get, if they're going to be able to get the experiences that they were hoping for, and certainly the college experience or the grad school experience they were hoping for. A lot of uncertainty regarding things like what the job force will look like once they're done, and what their lives will look like from week to week and month to month. So uncertainty naturally brings about a lot of anxiety, as we like to know what's happening in the future. Some other themes that we've noticed are things like feeling certainly socially isolated, not being able to interact with others the way we naturally do. For a lot of folks, it may mean either being with family, living with family, and not having a lot of outlets for space, which can be very distressing. And for others, it may mean being apart from family and being unable to interact the way we normally would. Folks experiencing anxiety about our own health of loved ones. I have grief and loss on here because certainly this is a time when we are experiencing grief and loss, not just when someone physically is distant from us or passes away, and that some folks may have experienced due to COVID itself, but also a grieving and loss process regarding time passing, months at a time of not being able to engage in things that bring us joy. So we're almost grieving a period of life of, you know, a lot of people are grieving the summer that they wish they would have had, or an upcoming graduation that they won't get to experience the same way. So a grief with regards to joy and experience. And then all of us adjusting to a virtual world. For a lot of folks, a lot of this is in some ways there are some conveniences, and in some ways there's a lot that's not ideal. So figuring out as a TA, what is this going to look like with everything online? How will I increase my students' engagement? Students may be feeling overwhelmed or disconnected from the virtual process of learning. So all in all, just a huge amount of transition and a lot of emotions being experienced during this time.
Thanks, Johanna. So I'm Dr. Gidgoud. I'm over in the Department of Psychology and a supervisor in one of our training clinics, the Office of Applied Psychological Services. So just like Johanna was talking about, there are a lot of different kind of routes for distress to be aware of in your new roles as a TA. We are a Research One institution, and so I'm always looking for data to support some of the things that we're seeing. And the CDC actually published some data at the end of last week that's illustrating exactly what Johanna was talking about. We're seeing elevated levels of depression and anxiety, a lot of which is due to increased social isolation as direct and indirect effects of COVID. This report also highlighted younger adults, racial and ethnic minorities, essential workers, unpaid adult caregivers as being disproportionately affected. And if you think about who our undergraduate population and our general student population is here at UIC, this data is really important to note in terms of what to expect in your new role as a TA.
Is that an okay time to switch, or is there more?
Great, thank you.
Okay, good. So thinking about some ways to support your students, and there'll be a few of us reflecting on this with regards to different perspectives, because there's lots of things you can do to support your students and to make sure that maybe some of this may apply to you as well, and make sure that you're getting the support that you need. But one of the first things is to identify different types of distress. So we know that people will illustrate distress in different ways. Some ways may be more obvious than others. Like certainly if we're talking to a student and we see that they're crying or that they're really emotional, we can go, wow, this person's really suffering, in a way that may be more apparent to us. However, there are a lot of us that are pretty good at hiding our distress. We're good at kind of showing to the world a different self than how we feel inside. And so sometimes you have to be a little bit more decode what the distress could look like. For instance, procrastination or missing classes or assignments. A lot of times we observe those behaviors and we go, this student doesn't care. Clearly this is not a priority for this student. They're not even showing up. But what we know, particularly as therapists, because we see students on the other end, when they say things like, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so anxious that I can't even go to class, that we know that distress may look like disinterest. And most people don't want to fail a class or don't want to do well at something. And so if you notice that someone is struggling, often it's not distress even though it looks that, or it's not disinterest even though it looks that way, that there's something deeper going on. And so having that in the back of your mind, that, you know, they seem like they don't care, they're not showing up, but they're still, if you think about it, they're spending a lot of money for this course. So something likely is going on. So knowing that that is still a cue for you to maybe check in with the student. Also thinking about how you can create what I'm calling a culture of care within your class. A lot of students feel maybe like they have to compare themselves to other people. that they have to be, show this image of being perfect and like they have it all together, when underneath a lot of students are struggling over the same assignments and the same exams. So encouraging things like study groups, particularly in a virtual world where it's really hard to have any connection, encouraging people to exchange emails, have study groups over Zoom or some virtual platform where they're working together, they're helping each other, and discussing ways early on how students can reach out for support. I work with students a lot where the goal is to get them comfortable enough to tell a TA or a professor that they're struggling. So if you can share in the beginning of your course or maybe during midterms, you know, hey, this is a time when stress can be really heightened. It's really common. Know that we are here to support you. If there's something that could use a little more clarification, or if you could use a little more support from me, please reach out. Now's the time to do so. So kind of lessening a bit of the stigma of asking for help. Please.
Thank you, Joanna. I'm sorry that I'm coming in a little late. I also have found, and this strategy doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but as someone who struggles with mental health myself, anxiety and depression and stress definitely heightens both of those things. I have found that by being open with my students with my own mental health struggles, it has really opened the door for many students to feel significantly more comfortable talking about any sort of barriers that are in their way. Obviously, that's not a strategy for everybody. Also, not everybody's mentally ill, of course. But I do find that the more open that you can discuss this with your students, the more likely they will feel comfortable coming to you for help. And it's just your job to make sure that you send them to the right person to help them.
I love that. Thank you for adding that. And I like how there can be such a wide range of how you do that. So you could say, I have been in therapy for a long time, I have anxiety. Or you can say, did you know that most of us experience some type of anxiety, me included? So you can find a way that you're comfortable. Or saying something like, did you know that most of us experience what we call imposter syndrome, which is the syndrome of when we think we're not ready or we're not as good as everyone else, but that we all experience that at some point. So there's a way to normalize anxiety, normalize feeling overwhelmed, that yes, it's more likely for others to go, oh, okay, I can talk about it here. So some things of what to do, along with what Lisa noted, of creating a culture where it's okay to talk about how we feel, and it's okay to name when we're feeling overwhelmed. Checking in with your students, and you can do this by stating an observation. I noticed that you haven't been to class recently, or you've missed a few assignments. How are you doing? Certainly working with your professor if you have a student of concern. And this is really important, referring for support. So it's important that you don't feel like you are alone holding the needs of your students, that there are lots of places on campus where you can get the support, or the student can get the support that they need. So simply saying, you seem really upset. Did you know that there are some places on campus to receive support, like the counseling center, like OPES, which is a clinic that provides therapy? Or did you know that there are some tutoring centers that could be really helpful? So you're checking in with the student and you're kind of gauging a little bit of what they need, and then you're pivoting to providing the referral for the support. And certainly consulting with other TAs and your professor about what seems like the best sort of support for your student.
Thanks, Johanna and Lisa. So my kind of thoughts about in my own role as a professor, what I often see when I think there might be some distress on the student end, certainly the tearfulness and emotions that we referenced already, requests for extensions just before, at, and immediately after deadlines. But one really interesting type of distress that students often, as TAs, jut up against are distressed emails. So I did just want to take a moment and give an example of how you might think about how to respond to some of these emails that are going to come in, especially during the time of COVID, where everyone's operating through technology and email for sure.
I wonder if we like polled folks of the distressed email, how likely they are to raise their hand.
Yeah, exactly.
2 a.m. email of just panic.
Yeah, well, speaking of Johanna, on the next slide, I have a little bit of an example for people to consider. I know you just got here and you're thinking about what it's going to be like to be a TA, but I'm going to paint a picture for you that might not be too far off of what distress might look like for our students this semester and what you might encounter. So let's say that you as a TA have administered an exam on a Tuesday morning, and you get 3 rapid fire emails at night, one at 11 saying, "Hi, I haven't seen my test grade. What did I get?" One at 11:05 saying, "What was the answer to question number 15?" And one at 11:10 p.m. that night getting, "Hello, when will grades be posted?" So just take a moment right now and think about how that might evoke some anxiety for you as a teaching assistant and trying to figure out how to navigate this distress. So Johanna, on the next slide, I have some steps for folks to consider about how to respond to these kinds of emails. So these are from some typical clinical skills that can be really helpful in navigating distress. So thinking about how to reflect what the student is trying to communicate. So saying like, "Hey, clearly there might be some anxiety here. It sounds like you're really eager to get your grade. I hear you. Those emails are loud and clear." Validating and maybe hypothesizing how they may be feeling. So saying something like waiting for grades can be really nerve-wracking. And then as a TA, you have to kind of protect your own stress level and reiterate the expectations of the course as well. Clarify the expectations and reiterate support. So as a reminder, grades are posted 1 week after examinations. If you would like to meet to talk about the exam, I welcome you to attend my office hours on Thursday at 2 p.m. I will say, as we're talking about emails, you may also want to consider talking with your fellow TAs, your instructor, and your mentor about time and role boundaries. You want to be mindful about rules in terms of when you want to let your students know that they can expect to get responses from you. So if you're going to give them a rule of, "I'm only going to respond during business days, and it can take at least 1 business day for me to respond," students will know that, or may be reminded that if they're going to send an email on the weekend, they're likely not to get a response until Monday or Tuesday. So talk with your instructor and your fellow TAs about what you want those time boundaries to be for yourself so that you can protect your own stress level as well. And use your resources. So Johanna said consult, make sure that you use the people and the resources around you, including your instructor, the counseling center, reaching out to our clinic in the Department of Psychology. We have instructors and TAs come up and consult with us from time to time about how to handle a student issue. Know your emergency resources on campus. Use your co-teaching assistant. Sometimes it's easier to ask a peer for some support and some guidance than maybe going right to your instructor or a mentor. But those are all options for you in terms of resources. Thanks, Johanna. So I think Ale has some information to share from her experience.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna and Grace and Lisa. Can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Sure can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, first of all, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to UIC. I am Alejandra Medina. I am a 3rd-year PhD student in public administration, and I've been working as a TA in my department since my 1st semester, so I'm very happy to share with you the things I've been learning across these years and some tips that hopefully you will find them useful to help the students and yourselves. And we were talking about how to help some students during these stressful times. And for me, something that helps really much was to identify which will be those weeks during the semester that students will be like more stressed than usual. And obviously during the weeks where you have midterms or final week, you will notice that students will be more stressed. And also when they need to submit some assignments, and or when they need to do some in-class presentations, even though now during this semester we're going to have these online courses, sometimes some professors will ask them to present, and you will notice that some of them are very shy or do not want to talk in public, even if it's like a Zoom meeting. So if you learn how to identify those things, you will be able to help students. In my experience, some students are very shy, but they have very, very good ideas. And when you talk to them and encourage them to talk and participate, that really, really helps and make the difference. And you will notice that by the end of the semester, those students will be very participate and will be sharing with their classmates and the professors ideas. And that is that is helpful for the whole class. So how can we help, as TAs can help students, right, during these stressful times? First of all, try to accommodate students' needs, especially if these times of COVID and this pandemic and this, with all these mental issues that maybe some of us are going through, try to accommodate students, but also try to let them know your expectations, our TA. As Johanna and Grace were mentioning, I mean, let them know that you are here to help them, but if they send you an email like 20 minutes before the deadline of our assignment or 5 hours before the deadline, you will not be in a position to help them. First of all, because remind them that you also are a student, right? We are graduate students, so this is not your only job, so you are not like full-time available for them. So let them know, I am here to help you, but also we need to follow these rules so we can all be like on the same page. And as I was mentioning before, if you are able to identify some of the strengths and weaknesses of the students, that will help you a lot to assist those students that you see are like more stressed than others. And in order for you to make you available as TAs, you need to schedule some of your times to have office hours. I use this app that is Calendly. It's free and it's very helpful because instead of sending emails back and forth, you can set the schedules where you are available, and students can go onto that application and select the spot that is available, and you will notice and you will receive a notification, and that is very easy for you to accommodate also your time. So this application has been very helpful for me. Next slide, please. Also, as Johanna and Grace were mentioning before, some ways that you can identify the students are stressed or are dealing with this stress is with their emotions, right? They are like us. So when they are like, you identify sadness, anger, indifference, apathy, or I mean, sometimes they are just not participating or they are just like not paying attention. Don't take it personally, right? Don't think they are being disrespectful, and try to think that maybe they are going through something difficult. So try to accommodate them and try to talk to them. And also, if suddenly students start to missing the deadlines and to not submit the assignments, that is also an alert that you can identify and you can help students. Try to engage. You will receive more mails from those students, from the best students asking you questions all the time, but also try to engage more with those students that are struggling the more in the course. Maybe they are not going to send you an email asking you questions, but if you notice that by week 4, a couple of students are not submitting the assignments, reach out to them and ask them if they are understanding the instructions of the assignments, if they receive all the notifications, if they are being able to connect to Blackboard or to listen to the lecture of the instructor, etc. Try to be there for them. And we at UIC have a lot of resources to make us available to the students, like Blackboard and Zoom and WebEx. Blackboard is super useful, and there are a lot of tutorials on the internet that you can Google, and I really encourage you to learn how to use Blackboard, because it will help you a lot, not only with the students, but also with the things you need to do for the instructor. And as Johanna and Grace and Lisa were talking before, keep always your supervisor informed about what is happening. When you identify that a student is going through a difficult time, they will know better how to help those students. So if you identify some of these students, talk to your supervisor at any time. Next slide, please. Finally, I would like to share more tips for us as TAs. First, if we want to help someone else, first we need to be calm, right? We are graduate students. This is your first semester, so you will also be a little bit stressed and distressed. So try to be calm and try to use also all these wonderful resources that Johanna and Grace are sharing are also resources for us as graduate students. There are not only resources for you to share with the undergrads, but there are also resources for you. I will recommend you to learn how to manage your time between all the things that you need to do as TAs and also your own workload, your own courses, the things that you need to do for your graduate program. During the times where you have to connect either on Blackboard or you need to be available with the instructor, try to really be focused on during those times to listen to the instructor lecture, to understand what the instructor is telling to the students. So because sometimes if we are not focused during the time of the class, then you need to go again and see what the instructor said and review the PowerPoint slides. So if you focus during the hours of the class and the times you need to be focused, it will help you a lot and you will have more time. And I don't know, sometimes we have the chance in our classes to choose which of the 15 weeks of the semester we would like to have an in-class presentation or to submit an assignment. If possible, try to accommodate your own assignments on the weeks that you will have a lighter workload as TA. Try not to submit an assignment during the midterm week or during the week after the midterm, because you need to be grading and helping the instructor. So if possible, try also to arrange your own schedule and it will be more useful for you. And finally, I would like to say, like, reach out to your supervisor at any time. And sometimes we do not want to bother the professors or the instructors because we thought that they are super busy. And yes, they are super busy, but they are also here to help us. So reach out to them at any time. Another thing that before I finish, I would like to mention, ask them for the rubric of how they want you to grade the assignments and the exams. That will help you a lot. And that will be like more accountable in the relationship with you and the instructor and the students. I think that for now, this is everything I would like to share. Thank you.
Yeah, those are great.
Can I add two things?
Yeah.
One, I was a TA for about, let's just say about 10 years, TA, GSI. So, and now I work in the sociology department. I do want to say one thing that I've learned that has radically changed my way to interact with undergrad students, especially those in distress, is to realize not to take it personally. No matter what's said in an email, oftentimes we voice frustration to those on the receiving end who don't necessarily deserve that. So it's a really important skill to realize that it's really not about you, okay? And the second thing that I have also found to be very helpful is that when I do get some sort of email from a student that may be in a tone that I don't necessarily appreciate, or maybe I'm making it that tone, wait 24 hours to respond. I know we want to do really good with our students and we want to respond right away. I have found myself responding immediately and regretting, because you also want to model the behavior you hope to see in your students. And so taking a step back will help you also respond in a way that maintains your own integrity as well.
That's great advice for all of us. Wait 24 hours. So we just covered some things of what you can do. Just as important are some things not to do. The first one would be to not ignore the problem. Trust your gut. If you have a hunch that something is going on, check in. We know that early intervention is best. So, and you know, if it happens later, it's still better than nothing at all. But I know I'll meet with students at the very end of the semester and it's kind of crushing, you know, how we just met maybe a few weeks earlier or during midterms. I think there's a lot that we could have course corrected. So I'm encouraging you to jump in and check in when you have a hunch that something is a little off. It's also important that, you know, now's not the time to diagnose the student, to practice hypnosis based on an article you read, and to have your student laying on the couch and, you know, doing all of that virtually anyway. So you are not the student's therapist. And so it's very important to remember your boundaries. You know, you're not meeting with the student for weekly appointments so they can tell you how they feel. You are there to be a warm person for them, to show that there's ways you can support them academically, and for more emotional type concerns, to guide them in the right direction. This is really to be protective of both you and the student, to not take on more than what would be appropriate for either of you. As we're talking about referrals, it's really important that you know about the Counseling Center. The UIC Counseling Center is eligible to all UIC students. All of our services are kept confidential, meaning they're kept private within the Counseling Center system. Aside from instances of an emergency that we need to handle appropriately, everything is kept as part of your medical records within our system. And our services are covered by UIC student fees. We don't take insurance, we don't take any payment. All that is covered with what you provide in your fees each semester. We offer a tremendous array of services, and we are completely open during the pandemic. So we're providing currently, and this could change as it changes very often, we're currently providing all of our resources remotely, and it's going really well. So we're still offering therapy, workshops, support groups, all of that over the internet, and it's been working wonderfully. Know that we offer in a range of services. So it could be something as simple as telling your student, hey, did you know that there's a lot of self-help reading materials on the Counseling Center website?
I'm really sorry, but we're actually out of time for this panel, so we have to move on to our next speakers, but thank you guys so much for your presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. And there's OAPS information. We look forward to having you or your students there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And we'll share these PowerPoint slides with everyone later so that they have the information. All right, so our final presenters for the day, we have the GEO. We're going to hear from, whoops, my screen share is not going on. Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's why. I'm so sorry. Okay, I didn't mean to share on top of your sharing. So we're going to hear from Jared O'Connor and Adam Pratt. All right, I'll leave the stage.
Oh, thank you. Let me just pull this up real quick. Oh, sorry, wrong button. Present, there we go. All right, hi folks. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Jared O'Connor. I'm a PhD student in English, and with me is Adam Pratt, who is a PhD student in mathematics. And we're the co-presidents of the Graduate Employee Organization, which is the union on campus that represents all GAs and TAs throughout the UIC.
Yeah, so like Jared said, we're Graduate Employees Organization. We're a local of the American Federation of Teachers and Illinois Federation of Teachers, part of the AFL-CIO. So we're a member-run labor union, which means that pretty much all of the organizers are actually grad students and members. And so we actually represent all of the teaching assistants and graduate assistants at UIC. So that's going to be pretty much all of you guys. So what we do is we bargain a contract with the UIC administration that kind of sets all of the work rules for TAs and GAs, and I'll talk in a little more detail about that in a second. But then we also kind of defend that contract against violations through the grievance process. So if you have kind of work issues, problems with your boss, that sort of thing, we're who you come to.
So how we operate is that we're a entirely member-driven union. So that means all the workers here, like right now, and then all the TAs and GAs across campus make up our bargaining unit. And we do all of the work that goes into the bargaining. We write the contracts, we do all this stuff. We negotiate with the university for both our contract and other issues such as impact bargaining, which we'll talk about shortly. But we're very much member driven. All of our officers are elected from the membership. Like I said, Adam and I are both TAs in English and mathematics respectively. We also have a variety of committees and caucuses. For example, we have a very strong international student caucus, which is composed of international workers across campus who rally and support international workers on various issues pertaining to international student fees, to visa problems, appointment policies, and et cetera. And we also have a lot of different kinds of caucuses. For example, we just had one on sexual harassment, detailing the kind of problems with sexual harassment reporting at UIC and working towards figuring out a solution that's amenable to us in the university. We also vote on a variety of issues, such as, we'll talk about this in a minute, but we went on strike not too long ago. So we vote on issues such as to go on strike, but we'll also vote on issues such as kinds of measures we want to take as a union to start working towards solving some problems, such as for most recent example would be impact bargaining, voting on what kind of measures we want to take in order to get the university to negotiate with us about our work and labor. We bargain our contract during what we call a formal negotiation with the administration. So this means that every 3 years, right now, our contract is the duration of 3 years. We have a committee called the Bargaining Committee who sits across from the university at the bargaining table. And we negotiate with the administration for a variety of things such as wages, healthcare, academic freedom, appointment policies, all these different things Adam will cover in a second. So we literally will sit across from the table with the university and pass back and forth contracts negotiations. And we also represent our members through grievance processes as pertaining to the contract. So if there's an issue with your employer, or if you are getting overworked, or your appointment was canceled for no reason, or you're not getting paid enough, any issue that's, or if your work environment's not safe, if you're working in a lab or something like that, all that's covered under our contract. And if you have concerns about any of that, the GEO will represent you in a contractual grievance process that is processed through the administration. We also organize constantly to take collective action on major issues that are important to us. Most recently, this was the strike, but we also organize extensively around COVID responses. So we work together as a collective, as a coalition, to try to better the work conditions, as we are workers on campus and we want the best possible conditions we can have to perform our duties the best we can.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a little bit about your rights as a worker. So that's kind of the union's job, is to protect your rights as a worker. And so we kind of mentioned that we bargained this contract that sets all of the rules for working. And so kind of some examples of that would be your health care. So we kind of set how much we pay for campus care. We set the minimum wage across campus every year, or at least minimum wage for TAs and GAs, and whatever raises we may or may not get.
Oh, sorry.
We have gotten protections against discrimination, which we'll talk more about in a second, paid sick leave, personal days, and parental leave, which you may or may not know that you actually get. And like we've mentioned, we have a grievance procedure that's kind of set out in the contract about how we can actually legally enforce this contract. Okay, and so kind of what we've won, in April 2019, we went on strike we went on strike in March through into April. We got a new contract in April, and we won a lot of really big, awesome things. So largest raises in our history. We got 4.5% raises each year for 3 years. Reductions in fees and fee freezes. We actually froze all of the fees, and which means they couldn't increase for the duration of the contract. And we actually cut some of the big fees, like the international student fee got cut in half. So we got more healthcare coverage. Our premiums got reduced for healthcare, or what we actually pay. We got transparency in appointments. So now large enough departments actually have to have an explicit written policy about how they make hiring decisions for TAs and GAs. So that's something we won. And then we got some new non-discrimination protections, including immigration and citizenship status and arrest record.
And then more recently, outside of our regular contract negotiations, we did what we call an impact bargaining, which is when you're bargaining in response to, say, a national crisis or a global pandemic, right? There's a article in Insider Higher Ed if you want to Google it to kind of get a summation of it. But basically what we won in doing that collective bargaining is we got free summer dorms for international workers who were kind of furloughed here and unable to travel back to their home countries. We got 100% coverage of emergency room expenses, full campus care coverage for COVID-related care. So that's testing and any care that comes with that. We also had mental health moved entirely to teletherapy, which was a big win for us because a significant amount of our members actually seek mental health. So having that available in teletherapy was very important to us. We also won the creations of hundreds of new jobs over this past summer to just design courses and things like that, just to make sure people have work, steady work, when a lot of courses were being canceled. We won masks for every worker on campus. We won the option to opt out of the CTA, the public transit pass that you pay to take the trains and the buses in Chicago. We won an opt-out, which was never an option before. And we also won the process to apply for one-year extensions or commitment to one-year extensions of funding, which is really important because a lot of people's work was interrupted by COVID. So this is just kind of a sample of what we do, is work around the pressing needs of our members and work to make sure that we can get these things in policy, that you are protected constantly through the GEO.
Okay, and so I want to talk a little bit about joining. So to join, you fill out and sign a membership card, which we'll give you some time to do in a second. We do pay dues. We pay 2.4% of a paycheck in membership dues each month. It comes directly out of the paycheck. I've never missed it. It's totally worth it. I mean, every raise we've ever gotten through the contract has totally offset that 2.4%. We've always gotten a higher raise than that. So you're certainly not losing money on it. A window opens each August where you drop. So when you sign up, you have to sign up for a full year. And that's just to secure the union's funding for a year. If people were dropping all the time, we couldn't necessarily make good financial predictions for the year. And so you don't really have to do anything to be in the union. You're just part of the union as soon as you sign a card and pay dues. But there are some ways you can get involved. So we have occasional membership meetings, usually 1 to 2 a semester. And we actually have a socially distant fall social coming up soon. So keep an eye out for that in your email. You can participate in actions like supporting bargaining once that starts, and campaigns, that sort of thing. And you can also become a steward in your department. So those are the people that kind of go between departments and union leadership and help make decisions. And there's an email there where you can email if you're interested in becoming a steward.
And just some clarifications how we use those dues. We pay our only staff person we have one staff person in our office who is a PhD, has a PhD, and has been in labor organizing for a long time. And she is just a really critical person for us to get some ideas off the ground. We also pay for legal counsel. This comes from bargaining, but also for the grievance processes. So we have a lawyer on retainer. We rent an office space right by the university, where we can meet outside of the confines of the university. And it pays for, things like when we're back in person, we often have like pizza parties and things like that. But for now, it's paying for like Zoom and these online technologies. So again, dues are 2.4 of the paycheck. This is the only funding we receive. So our membership is high. It's, I think, like 1,500 people right now. And so having y'all sign up too is really important. I know it sounds like a lot, but you really don't miss it. Once you like put it in your brain that it's gone, you'll never miss it. And the things you get from being in the union outweigh the cost, that for sure. Like winning, as Adam was saying, all those big raises we won totally offsets the cost of dues, but by usually 2 or 3 times. So what was this me? Why you should join? We're stronger together. We will win more in the future. More fee relief, better healthcare coverage, cheaper healthcare coverage. They're trying to raise our healthcare right now. I think they just did. So when these fees are unfrozen during our next contract, our healthcare is going to go whoosh way higher. Our power at the bargaining table depends on how many members we have. So to say, hey, we're representing 1,600 people is way better than saying, hey, we represent 800. So the more people we have, the better, the stronger we are, the more we can win, the more secure your job will be, and the more benefits you will get from it. Because you are workers, you're not just students, you're workers. Just like other unions, we operate solely on membership dues and are completely separate from the university. We are not a student organization, we're a union. But without these dues, there's no union. So it's the catch-22 of that. But the dues, again, are typically offset by the raises we win. And joining the union means you have a voice and you can fight for the rights collectively with your colleagues, including throughout the pandemic. This includes racial justice issues, gender and sex issues. If all these problems that could come up in your work environment, we can fight for you and make sure that you are not discriminated against and you can perform your job duties to the utmost quality that you can, because you're here, you're PhD students, you're obviously all very smart. So we know you can do your job well. Don't let the university stop you from doing that. And that's what we're here to do, is to make sure that you can perform your job as best as you can.
Okay, so here's a link where you can fill out a membership card now. I'll send it in the chat. And go ahead and take about 3 minutes to fill that out. Yeah.
And this membership card is all electronic. It's going to send you a confirmation to your email, to your UIC email. So once you get that, you'll get the confirmation and then dues will start being deducted. And then you'll officially become part of the bargaining unit. So yeah, please take a couple minutes and fill out the card there. And we're happy to answer any questions at this time as well. Sorry, we're running out of time. I'm like, woo!
The link is not working. Let me try a different link. Great. Okay, let's see this. Dang. Okay. Well, we will be sending out a link via email ASAP. If it does work for you, try to use it now, or just keep the page up and refresh later.
Yeah, we will make sure that, because all of you are listed on our email listserv, so we'll make sure we'll send that out right away. So you'll have that in your email. We apologize for that. If we were in the union last year, we're in the union this year. If you were, I'm going to try to rapidly answer some of the questions in the chat here. If you were in the union last year, but you're in a new position now, this probably means you're a new TA or GA, so you won't have to fill out a card. You should still be in the bargaining unit, but we can double check on that. I have your name, Matthew. For healthcare fees, it's not getting, yes, you paid in your semester fees. So that lump sum that's in there, you'll see on your cost. These fees were much higher a couple of years ago. We have it down to about $240, I believe, a semester now. To give you a clue, the university is trying to raise it up to $600 per semester. So we're keeping it capped. If you're signed up last year, you should still be signed up, Anastasia. We can double check on that. There's no, we prefer that you sign up now, but you can fill out cards basically any time, but the sooner is better because you can start getting in on it.
And to reach us, you can find us at uic-geo.net. It has all our email addresses where we can get you a card to sign up.
And then you don't have to renew each year as long as you're a TA or GA appointed. You should be automatically renewed. Sometimes your appointment switches. Sometimes you go from like having an RA ship to a TA ship. So those you would have to re-up your signed card. But usually if you're a TA consistently, you're good to go. And I think that's our time. I'm seeing the lights. So thank you for having us. We appreciate it. Mm-hmm.
It's timer.
Okay, thank you everyone for an amazing orientation day. We did this virtually and we really appreciate the time that you spent with us, and we know that this was a long day. So I hope this information was useful for you and that when you start your TA job that you hit the ground running and you have all the resources and programs available to you to help you have a great semester. Bye-bye, everyone.